the sovereign of the desolate sands. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 151, Gentle Country. On the same day, time went back to more than half an hour ago. Lanterns were hung high in the BU Tower and Yanli Lane, and candlelight filled the windows. Above the narrow streets, the night sky was a little powdery. Walking along the road, downstairs, old women with heavy rouge on their faces greeted and sent off guests, and upstairs, girls leaned on the railings to look around, their eyes rolling. As the most luxurious fireworks place in Jinhae City, BU Tower is different from other places. The four-story building facing the street is just a place for ordinary guests to have fun. Going deep into the streets behind the building, four independent elegant gardens that are completely isolated from the noise outside are the real dens for high-class guests to spend money. But today, this courtyard is full of insects and birds. When the moon passed the top of the tree, the two guests of the Lee family Wu Danki arrived as expected. After sending away the flattering steward, Zio 12 and Zio 13 each hugged the pretty girls named Bangsha and Bai Su, walked along the winding corridor guarded by carved railings, and walked into the backyard with dim lights. Carefully cultivated green plants, quietness in a bustling city, and the company of beautiful women. They have taken on the heavy responsibility of settling in Jinhae. Only at this time can the two nobles find a little bit of the taste of the past. 3 of the 4 elegant gardens are full. They have been to the remaining one many times, named Gentle Country. The 3-meter-high wall of the courtyard blocks the prying eyes of idlers. It is half covered by clumps of green bamboo, and behind it are 3 independent rooms distributed on the left, middle and right. The windows and doors are open, revealing the gauze curtains hung horizontally and diagonally in the house. The breeze passes by, sending the incense to the noses of the visitors. The 2 men hugged the girl and walked to the courtyard. Just as they were about to say goodbye, they vaguely found something wrong. Judging from their taste, the fragrance used in the BU Tower is naturally of a lower grade. But no matter how inferior it is, it will not be mixed with the smell of oil and rust on steel. Where did this thief come from? How dare he mess with our Jinhae Lee family? Zio Shizan shouted, pretending to hug Bai Su tightly in his arms, but his fingers touched the Kaheu point 1.5 inches away from the girl's third lumbar spine. When this point is hit, it can directly impact the kidneys, blocking blood and breaking ki. You traitor, do you really think you are a Jinhae person? A rough laugh came out first, full of contempt. In the central wing room, a giant man wearing heavy armor walked out with a bow on his back and a sword on his back. It was Liao's Hengheo, the garrison commander of the Jinhae City Defense Department. In the 2 wing rooms on the left and right, Hong Sheng and Hong Li appeared respectively. The 2 people from Fanshan Society turned around and wanted to retreat, but they saw Hong Wu blocking the gate with Kui and Chi Wu. 2 people in the heavenly and human sympathy plus 4 people in the pure realm. Zio 12 and Zio Shizan are both in the heavenly and human sympathy. If it were just these 6 people, they would not only not be afraid, but even feel that they have a 50% chance of winning. After all, the power of the Zixia Hulong Sutra is far beyond the comparison of the 3rd or 4th grade martial arts. But the arrangement here is not just like that. With Hong Wu's whistle, heavy footsteps were heard outside the gentle town. More than 20 Guantong realm experts wearing 2 layers of armor climbed over the courtyard wall, holding heavy nets in their hands, and spread out in all directions. After that, another 200 elite soldiers from the City Defense Department climbed up the courtyard wall along the wooden ladder and jumped to the roof, holding bows and standing on high alert. Seeing this scene, the hearts of the 2 Zayas sank to the bottom of the valley. Except for the organizers Hong Wu and Liao's Hengheo who knew in advance, Hong Sheng, Chi Wu and others only received the order this afternoon. The mixed Guantong realm team drawn from Zhuai Cavalry, City Defense Department and other places, as well as the archers of the City Defense Department, did not even know who they were going to deal with after deployment. 2 girls, there may be bloodshed here later, please take shelter for the time being, Hong Wu said to Bangsha and Bai Su, who were full of panic, while sitting at the main gate. My dear guest, Bai Su looked at the lover who had slept with her many times beside her, and asked. But before she could finish her words, the sudden burst of true energy had already taken her life. Bitch, Zio Shizan said coldly, and casually threw the female corpse in his arms away. On the other side, Zio 12 shook his head, quite dissatisfied with his brother's cruelty. Jingsha, you and I have a bond, I won't kill you. He scratched the cheek of the woman beside him, as if stroking a personal cat. But you are not allowed to leave, otherwise, you will betray me first. Zio 12 narrowed his eyes slightly, smiling. Jingsha felt a chill when she heard the words, and did not dare to look at him. She looked at Hongwu in panic. In the end, she did not dare to move her steps, and just stood there like sifting chaff. To be honest, this is unexpected today, Zio 12 asked. How did you know our identities? Why do you ask these questions now? Liao Zhanghao folded his arms and sneered. When you are released from prison, we will have plenty of time to get close to you. As he spoke, he signaled the Guanchong realm to slowly surround them. Seeing this, the two from the Fanchen Society knew that they could not delay. Just as the two exchanged glances, Hongwu also saw the clue and shouted first. Do it. The words came as an order. 6 nets were thrown out one after another, covering the center. Zio Shire naturally knew that the ground trap net specially made by the weaponry supervision was powerful. His eyes turned purple, and he used his precious true energy to blast his palms to the sky. Over the Yawen, low-temperature ice flows suddenly crisscrossed. The first net was the first to be hit, solidified and frozen brittle in an instant, and then was destroyed by the palm wind and scattered into countless particles. Zio Shizen's heavy fist followed. Between his 5 fingers, purple flames burned wildly, melting and burning the second layer of the net, splashing countless molten iron. This scene shocked Huang Liao and the others. The ground trap net they brought today is not an ordinary item. This net is made of special materials and is complicated to make. First, steel wire and silkworm silk must be kneaded together to form a rope, and then woven with a unique technique. Therefore, although the ground trap net is not heavy, it is extremely tough. Even if a martial artist in the Guantong realm uses all his strength, he can only cut a single mesh. Once you fall under the net, even if you are in the Hunran realm, you will lose 70% of your combat power. However, the 2 traders of the Fanchen Society in front of him actually destroyed the entire net with one move. Zixia Hu Longjing, Hongwu looked at the purple eyes of the 2 people and gnashed his teeth. Purple is a noble color. Dahua has always described its status as holding gold and hanging purple. Among the thousands of martial arts, the most famous one related to purple is the family martial arts of the Zio family in Xianjing. Even if it is the same realm, the difference in combat power under the blessing of different martial arts may be very different. Hongfen is the best example. Therefore, Hongwu suppressed his impatience and resolutely gave up the idea of going forward to fight. The freezing air and the fire flow complemented each other, breaking through the first 2 obstacles, and then opened large holes in the 3rd and 4th nets. However, the 2 of them failed to avoid the last 2 trap nets. As the nets fell, Liao Zhanghao shouted again to shoot arrows. The sound of bowstrings breaking through the air suddenly became urgent. Arrows were as dense as locusts, splashing in all directions. Under normal circumstances, unless the army formation was used to cover the shooting, the dynamic vision and coordination of ordinary soldiers were not enough to lock on to the master of heaven and man. But at this moment, facing the trap net, the 2 Zayas could not move, so one of them had to hold up the ice shield and the other waved away the firewall to forcibly block. The ice and fire were so bright that they defended tightly at the cost of a large amount of true energy. Jingsha, who was forced to stay in the center of the yard, was immediately shot into a hedgehog by the rain of arrows. Chapter 152 Noble Race. The offensive they faced was by no means limited. The wooden arrows of the soldiers could certainly be easily blown away by the airwaves. The 4-sided steel arrows shot by the Guantong realm needed to be blocked by distraction. In addition to the more than 200 people mentioned above, there were 6 true masters above the level of Quanren on all sides of Yawen. Hong Wuping held up a steel bow as tall as a person, put on a meter-long black iron heavy arrow, and slowly pulled it open. The force of this bow exceeded 2,000 pounds, and the heavy arrow used weighed exactly 2 pounds, with a kinetic energy of more than 6,000 joules. In Hong Fan's previous life, the muzzle kinetic energy of ordinary sniper bullets was only about 4,000 joules. And when it comes to the energy storage effect when flying through the air, heavy arrows are far better than bullets. When the bow was drawn and shot, everyone heard a fierce buzzing sound in their ears, and then saw Zio 12's body tilted, his thigh pierced by a heavy arrow and nailed to the ground. On the other side, Zio Shizen was also hit by 2 arrows, piercing his shoulder socket and waist side respectively. How dare you, The two nobles roared, cut off the arrow shafts, and tore the last 2 layers of trap nets without paying attention to the exhaustion of their only true energy. But behind the net, there are more throwing ropes. The beef tendons are smashed into thin threads, soaked with diluted fish bladder glue, and then entangled into long ropes as thick as the little finger. The long rope is wrapped with snakeskin leather and tied with claws that are sharpened to the point of breaking the blade. The snakeskin throwing rope made in this way cannot be cut by a knife, and the warhorse cannot pull it apart. Just when the two Zayas were out of their moves and were forced to recover their breath, a total of 7 throwing ropes hit them and hung their limbs. After each throwing rope, at least 2 Guantong realm warriors pulled it, with at least 3,000 pounds of force. The 2 injured Fanchiansh were no match for brute force. And when they used their true energy to freeze or burn the throwing ropes, they were hit by several powerful arrows from Hongwu and others. At this point, even the bodies of tigers and rhinoceroses could not support it. Seeing the 2 Zayas kneeling on the ground exhausted, Liao Zhenghao raised his fist and shouted at his men. At this time, the center of Yaoan was half frozen and half on fire. Various broken arrows and ropes were scattered all over the ground. I didn't expect that I would fall into the hands of some rotten fish and shrimp after a miscalculation, Zhao Shire said, supporting his knee with his left hand, grabbing the hook on the side of his leg with his right hand and pulling it out with all his strength. A string of blood beads came out, and the wound was immediately frozen by the cold air. I ask again, how did you know our identities? He forced himself to stand up and looked up at Hongwu. It's okay to tell you, Hongwu leaned on the steel bow with one hand and laughed happily. My nephew Hongfan found that the Li family was different, so he secretly investigated and screened the suspicious people one by one, and finally locked you two. While the traitor Xingjin, I should have killed him first at all costs. Zhao Shizen's sword eyebrows were raised, and regret appeared on his face. Hong Li was furious when he heard this. 2 turtles trapped in a jar, still barking like defeated dogs. If you have a trace of conscience, you should. He was interrupted before he finished his scolding. Shut up, Zhao Shizen scolded. A lowly person from the borderland is qualified to talk to us like this. Seeing the contempt expressed by the 2 Zayas, Hong Li, who always pays attention to his appearance, was so angry that he couldn't even scold back. Zhao Shizen became more and more disdainful. On the other side, Zhao 12 took 2 steps forward and forced his true energy to freeze the bloody Pinelia and white fragrance into ice. After shaking off the arrow shaft, the 2 men actually used the woman's corpse as a chair and sat down. Such a rampant behavior immediately angered everyone. Catch this official for me, Liao Zhenghao shouted. As soon as the military order was given, several experts in the Guantong realm of the city defense department immediately untied the iron chains around their waists and were about to step forward. Seeing this, Zhao 12 glared at them and shouted loudly. Who dares to come up? Then try the self-sacrificing method of Zixia Hulong Sutra. As soon as these words came out, everyone hesitated. There were more than 200 heroes present, so there was no shortage of courageous and fearless people. Hongwu, Liao Zhenghao and others hesitated, but they were afraid of forcing the 2 big fish to death. The scene was deadlocked for a while. The many guests in the front yard of BU Tower who didn't know what was going on followed the excitement and were forced back by a dozen soldiers. Zhao Shire then sneered. People who look ahead and behind are not presentable after all, he sneered and looked at Hong Xing. In this yard, only you, Hong Xing, can still catch my eye, but you are still not qualified to negotiate with the 2 of us, Zhao Shire said and hooked his finger at Hongwu. Hong Chang judge, go get your elder brother, and Hongfan, he set up a trap for the 2 of us, and he dared not be here. How can the Nano Zhao family bear such humiliation? Zhao 12 gritted his teeth, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and threw it into a pile of ice chips. Besides, I'm empty-handed now, and the pad under my butt is not comfortable enough. Send someone to get tables, chairs, wine and meat for the 2 of us, the best. Hongwu lowered his mouth and turned a deaf ear. Humph, the situation is in your hands, what are you afraid of? Zhao 12 frowned, his tone impatient. Don't worry, my 2 brothers have spoken, and they can't go back on their words. Go get the wine and food. Before we see them, we will neither run away nor die. With this, Hongwu and Liao Zhenghao exchanged glances, and then raised their chins to a city defense officer behind them. Go to Jinfeng Tower and prepare a table of wine and food, and send it over quickly. Zhao Shizen suddenly interrupted as soon as he finished speaking. Wait, he reached into his arms, took out a silver ingot and threw it over. After getting Hongwu's approval, Shijiang picked up the silver and weighed it. It weighed 2 taels. My young master has always been well-dressed and well-fed. Don't try to fool me, Xiao Shizhen continued. Go to Tinghe Pavilion. For this meal, I want the best dishes and the strongest wine in Jinhe. After saying this, he spat a mouthful of blood on the ground. The red splashed, with golden dots in it, which was very eye-catching. 2/4 of an hour later, a team of soldiers carried tables and chairs in, set them up beside the 2 people from Fanshan Society, and displayed the wine and food in the food boxes one by one. Seeing this, the Xiao brothers sat at the table opposite each other. They did not remove the arrows from their bodies, and ignored the blood from the corners of their mouths. They just grabbed the meat with their hands and put it into their mouths to chew. It was inconvenient to pour the drinks, so Xiao 12 ordered the soldiers to pour the wine for them. Hongwu sneered and nodded in acquiescence. After another 1/4 of an hour, the soldiers guarding the back door of the BU tower retreated. Everyone turned around and saw that it was Hong Jian, Hong Fan and his group coming. Brother, where's Mr. He? Hongwu stepped forward and asked softly. Yes, Hong Jian was very frugal with words. Under the protection of 2 teams of red-clothed riders, several people walked into the yaon. At this time, the wooden table was already littered with cups and plates. The Xiao brothers were sweating and pale, but their injuries were even worse. Seeing more than 20 people coming in with a blatant temper, they did not look at the leaders Hong Jian and Zhang Zhen, but just stared at Hong Fan. Xiao 12 and Xiao 13, right, Hong Fan was naturally not afraid and asked frankly. The traitors that Fanshan Society deployed in Jinhe City are you too? Xiao 13 did not answer, but shouted arrogantly. You poor bastard, since you know that it is the noble son of the Nano Xiao family, how dare you not kneel? As soon as these words came out, Hong Lai and other red-clothed cavalrymen holding torches and guarding the side immediately became angry and pressed the hilts of their swords. But Hong Fan was not angry at all, but shook his head and smiled. P.S. The operation officer will update it for me. I just returned to Shanghai in the afternoon. Thank you for your support. Good night. Chapter 153 White Snake. You are at the end of your rope, and you can only ask for this kind of verbal advantage, Hong Fan replied seriously. I overestimated you. He waved his hand, signaling the soldiers pouring wine at the table to go away. Tonight's matter is to take 2 fronts at the same time and eradicate all evil. Li Heming has just surrendered. I have also discovered all the means you arranged inside and outside the city. It is meaningless to be stubborn. It is better to confess honestly and avoid living punishment, Hong Fan advised in a gentle voice. Perhaps infected by his emotions, the Xiao brothers calmed down inexplicably. You said you overestimated the 2 of us, Xiao 12 repeated in a low voice, carefully washing the oil stains on his hands with the remaining wine in the cup. It's better to say that it was my 2 brothers who underestimated you. He raised his eyes and looked at Hong Fan's face carefully. After all, it was he who gave you the life star. When mentioning this, the 2 brothers showed hatred on their faces at the same time. In Hong Fan's view, their emotions did not seem to be directed at themselves, but more like the identity of the Star Lord. Do you 2 have a grudge against Jingsha Star Lord? Hong Fan asked. Are you talking about Ma Jingsha? Xiao Shizhen looked away, speaking frivolously. He's just an old revolutionary in the north, living a muddled life, and his death is insignificant, Hong Fan frowned. Are people who collude with foreigners worthy of talking about life and death? He retorted. You think you deserve to die for your own selfish desires, even at the cost of harming innocent people. The Xiao brothers were not annoyed when they heard this, but just sneered and didn't answer, with a bit of martyrdom. Hong Fan, no matter how smart you are just helping the tyrant to do evil, Xiao Shire laughed softly. The 2's inappropriate arrogance angered Zhang Zhen, Guangxin Shi and others. The traitors are stubborn, and my nephew doesn't need to waste time with them anymore, Zhang Zhen said, motioning his men to arrest them. At this moment, the innate spiritual energy in Yaon suddenly vibrated. Hong Fan's muscles tightened, his hand pressed on the hilt of the knife, and his eyes condensed. A light purple diamond suddenly appeared between the throats of the 2 Xias, and then shattered. It was like a scale that had been torn off. The next moment, ice and fire went wild. Without any words or eye contact, Xiao 12 and Xiao 13 supported their injured bodies and jumped up at the same time, aiming directly at Hong Fan. Knife-like blood mist shot out from their frozen or carbonized wounds, blowing away the dust. Extremely cold air and high heat purple flames hovered in the palms of the two. Wherever they passed, they left traces of freezing and burning. The power exceeded the control limit, so it spread with every move. In Hong Fan's perception, the scale of the innate spiritual energy that the two people attracted was actually similar to that of Li Heming when he was at full strength. The power of the innate 3-in-1 combined with the interaction between heaven and man is terrifying. But he was not panicked at all. Almost at the moment when the red and blue light was reflected, Hong Jian, who was in the same line with him, had reacted. He started later, but arrived first. Everyone only felt a flash of fire in front of them. And Hong Jian's figure had disappeared on the spot. Xiao Shizhen thought he had turned into fire, but now he felt burning. 5 meters away from Hong Fan, he was hit in the abdomen by a roar of fire from Hong Jian, who was running towards him. The pain did not have time to dissipate, and his flesh and nerves were burned. Thunder sounded in his ears, and Xiao Shizhen could no longer hold the purple flame in his hand, nor could he keep his feet steady. He lost all his strength and fell forward due to inertia. This scene was seen by Xiao Shire, who was a few steps behind. As expected, Hong Jian, who was innate, was unable to block the killing moves of both people at the same time. In shock and anger, Xiao Shire had to give up his original goal and press the innate frost of his right palm towards the oncoming person. Hong Jian responded with an iron hand. The fist and palm met, and there was a loud bang. Starting from Xiao Shire's 5 fingers, the frost melted in an instant. The hot wind swept across his right arm like a knife, dismembering the frost and destroying the sleeves. Xiao Shire roared and tried to move, but Hong Jian grabbed his throat with his right hand, and after destroying his dantian, he lifted him off the ground in the air. On the other side, Hong Fan looked coldly at Xiao Shizhen, who was dazed and staggering towards him. After being promoted to the pure realm, his nerve reflexes increased significantly. Although it was only a moment, it was enough to make the judgment that the other party was already incapacitated. But Hong Fan still drew his sword. The courtyard was full of flames. Baize slashed across the sky, and the blade reflected the fire, like the rising sun. The head rolled down. A little golden red blood slid down the knife, soaking the 4-character knife inscription heroic and strange killing all, and then boiled and evaporated. This, seeing the important criminal being beheaded, Zhang Sun suddenly became angry. But when he saw the lingering fear on Hong Fan's face, he finally withdrew his scolding and only sighed softly. Hong Fan's excessive treatment just now was actually intentional. Since absorbing the essence and blood of the dragon heir and harvesting a dragon soul fruit, he has always had a guess. That is, those who carry dragon blood can become the energy source of the dragon soul tree. But dragon sons are rare after all. Killing Xiao Shizhen at this time can verify the mechanism. After sheathing the knife, he silently looked inward, and indeed saw the long wind blowing on the spiritual platform. The golden roots of the dragon soul tree swayed gently, drawing in external energy. Then, a fruit grew between the branches. The flesh contained golden veins, but the fruit color was only light red. It was not ripe. The royal family can really give birth to the dragon soul fruit. Hong Fan's face did not move, but he was surprised in his heart. It's a pity that Xiao Shizhen alone can't catalyze a complete fruit. He didn't think it was strange. After all, the two brothers of the Xiao family were obviously a few years older than him, and they practiced the world's first-class skills, but they only had the heaven man's sympathy cultivation, which showed that their talents were very ordinary. Master Zhang, Master Gongsun, Hong Fan's heart settled down and turned to look at the two. Just now, I was stimulated by Xiao Shizhen's innate killing move. And I overreacted for a while and hurt the prisoner's life. He bowed slightly and spoke sincerely. To be honest, Zhang Sun did care about this matter. The merit of capturing the traitor of Fenshin society alive is definitely greater than that of killing him. But the one who made the mistake was Hong Fan, so even if he was dissatisfied, what could he do? How can you blame my nephew for this? With the experience of many years of ups and downs in the officialdom, Zhang Sun immediately suppressed his emotions and comforted him without leaking a single drop of water. The villain fought desperately, but it was his own fault, and there is another one. Following this sentence, everyone looked at Xiao 12. At this time, he had been thrown to the ground by Hong Jian. There was no resentment, no fierceness, but a twilight face, like a dead tree strangled by the autumn wind. Severely injured, he used the self-sacrifice method, and half of his meridians had been destroyed. Hong Jian, has your cultivation level broken through the innate 4-in-1? Xiao 12 asked with his head raised. Yes, now it is the innate 6-in-1, Hong Jian replied. There was a commotion in Yaoan. Especially Hong Sheng was dumbfounded and couldn't believe what his father said. Or is it the Yanlu Guang? Xiao 12 asked again. Hong Jian nodded. Xiao Shire was stunned for a moment, then sighed softly. I didn't expect that a small family in the frontier could produce 3 heroes in 2 generations. The ancients said that there is no way out for people. This is what it means. At the signal of Liao Shubai, several soldiers came up and tied up Xiao Shire. At this time, there was a rustling sound from the corpse at the entrance of Yaoan. Everyone turned to look. Xiao Shizin's broken bones were sharp, and there was not much bleeding. What is that? Hong Lai frowned and took a step closer, tilting the torch. Under the light of the fire, it was a small jade white snake that poked its head out of the wound and spit out its snake tongue. Master, Hong Lai took a breath, stepped back 2 steps, drew his knife, and called. Hong Jian, Guangxin Shi and others surrounded him. With their eyesight, they could see more clearly. This snake was only half, and it was actually parasitic on human flesh. Hiss, the white snake struggled and swung, perhaps because it had lost its host, and soon died in front of everyone's eyes. The strange scene in front of him shocked everyone in the elegant garden into silence. Hong Fan was worried and had a sense of foreboding. Chapter 154 There is no such a time. Northeast of Jinhei City. Torches were everywhere, lighting up the night like day. Led by the city defense commander Hong Chang, with Zhu Ai cavalry and Xiaoyang on cavalry as the backbone, plus a team of more than 1,000 soldiers from the city defense department, they surrounded the entire Li mansion. This was a rare bustle in the lives of the people of the city. Outside the street in front of the Li mansion, where the army was under martial law, people who heard the news were crowded everywhere. Young men from various families with nimble legs and feet, such as Hong An and Hong Fu, climbed up the walls and houses, wishing they could grow 2 more pairs of eyes. At the beginning of the high hour, 9 o'clock in the evening, Hong Jian, Zheng Sun, and Gongsun Shi took Xiao 12 to the city defense mansion. On the other side, the final matters of suppressing the Li family were handed over to Liao Zhanghao and Hong Wu. A quarter of an hour later, the city defense department forcibly separated the crowd with guns. Hong Fan and others arrived at the main gate of the Li mansion. Thousands of elite soldiers, more than 50 of them have achieved penetration, 7 have achieved the state of complete perfection, and 4 have achieved the state of communication between heaven and man. For the Li family, who have lost their swords and cranes, this is already a mountain of pressure. The Li mansion has been under martial law. Its gate is wide open, with only barricades on both sides, as if to show that they have a clear conscience. Li Lichen, the second master of the Li family, stood in front of the threshold with armor and sword, followed by dozens of fully armed Wudan cavalry. As for the walls on both sides, there are more than 100 family soldiers holding bows and swords on guard. The 2 sides confronted each other, and the whole street was solemn. Facing hundreds of powerful arrows, Hong Fan and his entourage walked to the gate and stood still. Hong Wu exchanged glances with Liao Zhanghao, stepped forward and spoke loudly. I am Hong Wu, the 6th-rank city judge of Jinhei. Listen up, men, women, old and young inside. The Li family's top brass colluded with the traitors of the Fanshan Society and colluded with the Snake people to destroy Jinhei. The evidence is solid. Under the order of the city lord and the entrustment of Gongsun Wujian, Liao Shubai and I are now going to clean up the Li mansion and wipe out the remnants. I now order you to kneel down and surrender your weapons immediately. If you resist stubbornly, don't say I didn't warn you. A few words spread out loudly, and the whole audience was shocked. One of the 3 families in Jinhei was in contact with the Snake people. This news was too big and too sudden. The people watching the excitement in the streets and alleys were skeptical. Wu Danqi and the children of the Li family felt that they were wronged and their faces flushed. Impossible, you, the Hong family, are slandering us, to accuse us. The long street was filled with shouts and whistles. Until a thunder exploded. It was Liao Zhanghao who stepped down and crushed a piece of bluestone slab. This matter is confidential, so it's normal that you are kept in the dark, but what the Hong Chang judge said just now, there are witnesses and physical evidence, he shouted in a rough voice, and before he could explain more, his pair of big copper bell eyes stared at Li Lichen who was dozens of steps away. Lichen, I just want to ask you, do you know about this? Li Lichen was silent after hearing this. He has served as a captain under Liao Zhanghao for many years, and has been a colleague of Hong Chang for many years. After a while, the second master of the Li family just shook his head randomly. Seeing this, Hong Fan spoke loudly. Second Master Li, you said you didn't know about this, and I believe it. Then do you believe what the Hong Chang judge said just now, that Li Heming was colluding with foreign races? He sneered. If you don't believe it, you can go to the back garden of the mansion now. The exit of the tunnel leading from the north wall is right there. Li Lichen was silent again, not speaking or moving. At this point, what else did Liao Zhanghao not understand? Li Lichen, you and I have worked together for many years, and we have fought side by side. I really can't believe that you would actually harm me, he shouted angrily, holding the knife handle with his hand, but there was a look of sorrow in his eyes. Under the High family, Li Lichen let go of the knife handle, and he was too ashamed to look his superior in the eye. It seems that Mr. Li has acquiesced, Hong Fan continued. The conspiracy with the snake people was planned by the two people from Fanshan Society and Li Heming. Tonight in the Hong Mansion, in front of Lord Zhang and Lord Gongsun, Li Heming has confessed, but even if he said so, most people still refuse to accept it. You are just empty talk, who knows whether it is true or not. If you want us to surrender, you must let the head of the family give the order in person, a Li family member shouted. At this point, Hong Fan finally waved his hand to the back. Exposing the body on the street after death is a severe punishment on the same level as digging up the grave in Dahua. But now there is no other way. The soldiers made way to the side of the road. A horse pulled a cart covered with white cloth from behind and stopped in front of the Li mansion. Hong Fan walked to the side of the cart and lifted the cloth. Everyone looked along the firelight and saw a corpse lying on the cart. His chest was charcoal black and his clothes were tattered. But his face had been cleaned, and he was handsome and clear, so the people of Jinhe recognized him at a glance. It was Jian Mingheli himself. Seeing Li Heming's corpse, the Li family seemed to have their bones pulled out. The people who were watching the excitement also stopped talking. On the long street, the atmosphere was frozen. Receiving Hong Fan's signal, Hong Sheng held out another wooden box. When he opened the lid, the head of Xiao Shizhen was revealed. Fanshan Society was formed by the descendants of the rebellious kings 200 years ago. The two people sent to Jinhe this time were named Xiao 12 and Xiao 13, and took shelter under Wu Danqi, Hong Fan said loudly. The former has been captured alive, and the latter's head is here. Hong Sheng brought the wooden box to the torch. Everyone looked in the direction of the light and saw the blood mixed with gold at a broken neck. Gold in the blood is a characteristic of a noble family. Xiao Shizhen's face was recognized not only by Wu Danqi, but also by many people in the Li family. The two evidences corroborated each other, and there was no more noise for a while. The Li family member who had just questioned swallowed his saliva, and it seemed that he could no longer hold the sword. Everyone, I have said all the good words. Hong Fan covered the corpse with a white cloth and turned around to say. Think about it again, the abnormal situation on Heishangfei some time ago. How did the Guangkunlu family suddenly get the news, and why did Li Heming suddenly insist on moving the clan? He swept the people on the wall with a stern look. I have said it before, and now is the time to say something. If you don't cooperate later, you will be punished for openly resisting the law. No one responded. Hong Fan knew that the fire had reached. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, he put his hands behind his back, walked into the battle formation in a cloth robe, and passed through the encirclement of the Wudan cavalry holding swords on both sides, as if he was entering an empty space. Under the Li family's gate plaque, Hong Fan stood in front of Li Lichen. The second master of the Li family was very tall. He clenched his fists and looked down at the most outstanding junior of Jinhe. Second master Li dares to look at me. Hong Fan looked at him and smiled. Why don't I dare to look? Li Lichen clenched his fists and asked back. Hong Fan sneered at the words. Li Dahua dares to look at me, but I don't know if he dares to look at the people on the street behind me. He turned around and pointed. If your plan succeeds, they will all die at the hands of the snake people, and Jinhe City will also become a den of ghosts, Hong Fan said and made way. Li Lichen gritted his teeth and took a few deep breaths, but he didn't raise his eyes after all. Finally, his clenched fists loosened. Hong Fan, Li Lichen called out. Did you break our business? He glanced at the center of the street and saw Liao Zhanghao, Hong Wu and others letting Hong Fan lead, as if he had realized something. Did you set up today's situation? I did, Hong Fan replied. In that case, the Li family should thank you. Li Lichen sighed, unsheathed the long sword from his waist and threw it on the ground. When I go to the city guardhouse later, please tell me everything. Captain Li, Hong Fan said. It's my duty, Li Licheng nodded. Then I'm sorry, Hong Fan said, and stepped forward to punch. Li Licheng didn't defend himself, and let the punch hit his danshan. The flame flow energy poured in like a sea tide, burning the meridians and destroying his cultivation. The second master of the Li family staggered back 2 steps, like a mountain collapsing, and sat on the threshold of the Li mansion. Hey, good, in the severe pain, he laughed loudly regardless of the blood on his front. For the past year, waking has been like dreaming, and dreaming has been like waking. I have never been more relaxed than I am now. P.S. I have fewer and fewer manuscripts in my inventory, and I feel like I can no longer maintain the 2-a-day update schedule. How can I describe my worry? Chapter 155 The Difficulty of Death. Li Licheng's fall was the last straw that broke the camel's back. No matter how stubborn the Li family was, they realized that they were in big trouble. Hong Fan took a step to the side and pressed the tip of a Wudan cavalry captain. The latter was forced to lower his sword. Second Master Li has confessed his guilt, Hong Fan shouted. Why don't you surrender? The power of his shout made the captain tremble all over. With a clang, the long sword fell to the ground. Then there was a chain reaction. For a while, all the swords, spears, and halberds fell, and the clangs came one after another. Hong Fan stepped over the threshold and swept his eyes left and right. Wherever he looked, all the Li family members knelt on the ground with their heads in their hands. One person subdued 100 people, which made Hong Fu and others standing on the roof outside stunned. Liao Zhenghao waved his hand, and the soldiers rushed forward like a stream, kicking away the weapons on the ground and controlling everyone one by one. Where is your eldest son? Hong Fan asked everyone in the Li family. I saw him in Heli Hall before, someone replied. It was Li Zingfa. Thank you, Hong Fan nodded to him and then walked in. Heli Hall Li's family. The candles were not lit and it was pitch black. The 4-character plaque Zhang Xiangguan Guo was hung high on the beam. It is said that it was written by the former governor of Liangzhou when the ancestor of the Li family was awarded the title of Fuguo Ziaoi for his military exploits. In the center of the main hall, there was a wooden chair. Li Shenji sat alone on it, with a neat appearance, incense and jade. In front of him, the moonlight slanted in along the gate, and stopped at the blue bricks 1 foot apart, like a sharp blade hanging. Heli Hall is not close to the main gate of Li's mansion. But the mansion was extremely quiet tonight, and the sound could barely reach here. Unfortunately, the words that came over the wall and across the courtyard did not have any good news. First, there was the bad news that Li Heming and the Zhao brothers were either dead or captured. Then there was Hong Fan's scolding and the sound of weapons falling to the ground. Seeing the flickering fire outside the courtyard slowly approaching, Li Shenji's face was slightly relieved of his trance, and his eyes finally regained some light. The winner is the king and the loser is the bandit, he lowered his head and muttered to himself, staring at the moonlight that had climbed up his body without knowing when, and pulled out the fine sword on his knees. It's just a life. Li Shenji's chest rose and fell, and he raised the sword with both hands and slowly placed it across his neck. The sword tip was immersed in the moonlight. It was a little cold when it touched his skin, and then it went straight to his bones. Li Shenji's teeth began to chatter. He closed his eyes, pushed the blade back with force, and cut into his neck 1/2 inch. Pain spread. The overly trembling hand tilted the sword tendon and tore the wound. The fishy smell surged up. Li Shenji glanced down and saw the deep red blood flowing down the sword, and his heart suddenly surged with unspeakable fear. Hickey, he hurriedly covered the wound on his neck, but he couldn't help vomiting. A few mouthfuls of sour and smelly yellow water splashed on the blue bricks, and Li Shenji collapsed on the chair, tears streaming down. The eldest son of the Li family had killed several people, and had not hesitated to exchange the entire city of Jinhe for the second-grade martial arts book. However, he only knew today how difficult it was to die. At this time, a sneer sounded in front of the hall. You don't want to live, you don't want to die, Mr. Li, what do you want to do? Li Shenji looked up and saw Hong Fan standing outside the door. The moonlight stretched Hong Fan's shadow, covering Li Shenji's entire body. I suddenly remembered the first time I watched the 4 lists last year. Hong Fan stepped into the door and continued. That time, Mr. Li couldn't stand the eyes of everyone, but I didn't expect that today you didn't even dare to go to the main gate. He shook his head disdainfully. If you don't dare to die, why are you pretending to hold a sword? Hong Fan shouted. Yes, Li Shenji didn't wipe his tears, but just threw the sword away. Then he slid down from the chair and knelt in Hong Fan's shadow. "Shenji knows everything, please spare your life, Master Hong." Hong Fan raised his hand and did not reply. The sound of armor rubbing came from far away. Hong Lai, Shen Hong and others who were guarding the gate of the courtyard came in big strides. "Capture him, destroy his cultivation, and take him back to the prison of the city guard mansion," Hong Fan said casually, turned around and left without looking at Li Shenji again. At the same time, north of Jinhe City, more than 300 miles away, the western wilderness swamp, the paradise of snake people and the forbidden area of humans. Layers of clouds covered the night sky, and the moon was behind them, like a glowing fog. Under the sky, the wetland was flat and vast. Meadows, reeds, mosses, and hills slightly higher than the ground divided the dark green water into countless small pieces. At the edge of the swamp, less than 30 miles away from the Jinhe Desert, there grew a giant tree. Or it could be said to be a dense forest. This is a swamp banyan, rooted here for unknown years. The tree canopy is over 30 meters high, covering a diameter of over 100 meters, with thousands of aerial roots hanging down. The tree is like a canopy. The small area of water it protects is constant day and night, like an independent kingdom. Under the core branch of the marsh banyan, an ancient tripod is newly erected. The bronze tripod is old and worn, with a layer of patina on the outside. The dragon pattern originally carved on it has lost its details and looks like a swimming snake. Splash. There is a sound of water splashing in the tripod, as if something is swimming. As the night deepens, the swimming sound gradually becomes lower. After a while, the movement stopped and the forest returned to silence. Then, the sound of scales and bark rubbing against each other can be heard from the tree. Along the trunk, an 8-meter-long huge creature silently circled down and poked its head to look in front of the tripod. The tripod is filled with blood. The blood feeds snakes. This is a small white snake. Its body was obviously deformed, with an unnatural bend at the 5-inch mark. More accurately, it looked like it originally had 2 necks and 2 heads, and later one was cut off along the bifurcation. At this time, the white snake floated on the bloody surface with its back up, no longer moving. The inquirer stretched his neck, swallowed and uttered a long letter, and soon confirmed a fact. The white snake was dead. So it slid down the trunk, stood up its upper body, which was more than 3 meters high, and took off the weapon on its back. The weapon was 2 meters long and weighed hundreds of pounds, huge and rough. It was more like a giant metal stick than a knife, but the narrow side was sharpened to a rough edge. Holding the weapon in hand, the snake warrior swung it lightly and smashed the tripod with the back of the knife. A buzzing sound like a huge bell spread under the tree. In an instant, the entire swamp fig seemed to come alive. First, the branches and leaves rustled, then the scales and keratin scraped against the hardwood. Finally, thousands of aerial roots actually shook at the same time. Densely packed snakemen coiled down along the branches of the aerial roots, some fell into the swamp water, or hung upside down. The snakeman general pressed down the bronze tripod with one claw. After the bell stopped ringing, the noise gradually stopped after a few breaths. There was no idle chat, no complaints. The swamp banyan forest was so quiet that it seemed as if nothing had happened. Only thousands of pairs of eyes reflecting the faint light were looking at the tall snake general in front of the bronze tripod. It held a blade in one hand and pressed the tripod with the other hand. It was wearing a simple shoulder armor and chest armor, and its body was covered with red scales. The sharp and hoarse snakeman language sounded. By the order of the Son of God, in the name of Jilin, to the south, P.S. The story of the Li family has come to an end, and the first volume will soon end. In terms of characters, I want to write some style and characteristics for Li Heming, Li Lichen, and Li Shenji. But in terms of structure, I can't allocate too much space for them, otherwise it will affect the rhythm of the Hongfen line. I can only say that this paragraph was written very carefully. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 156 Nightgrass. The 4th day of the 3rd lunar month in the 28th year of Zheng was an unforgettable day for the people of Jinhe. Overnight, Jian Minghali, who was like a flag, died, and all the senior members of the Li family were imprisoned. One of the 3 surnames of Jinhe was actually branded as a traitor. This was a huge event for a small city. The absurdity of the incident and the suddenness of the incident made countless people in the city worried and unable to sleep all night. That night, Yanlu Lane was particularly deserted. But in many other places in the city, the lights were on all night. Until the early morning of the 5th day of the 3rd lunar month. The sun did not give anyone face and rose as usual, making the light of dawn bloom on time in the eastern sky. So, life returned to normal at a speed that no one could imagine. On Chisha Avenue, yawning people opened their doors and set up stalls. As the sun rose, the flow of people gradually became crowded. As usual, the heat of tofu pudding and the fragrance of steamed buns began to diffuse. The only difference was that Lee Hemming's name was repeatedly heard inside and outside the shop. Just like a new breakfast condiment, in a blink of an eye, another 4 days passed. It was noon on the 9th day of the 3rd month. In the side room of Mingshan Hall, wine and food were flowing in. A second-class housekeeper dismissed a maid and waited in the room in person. Second brother, Hong Ping poured a glass of wine for Hong Fan and asked, "How do you know that people's hearts have settled down on the Lee family's affairs?" "Aunt Liu told me," Hong Fan replied casually. Hearing this, everyone was surprised. Hong Fan smiled and swallowed a piece of lamb face meat. "Yesterday, my aunt went to Tinghe Pavilion to get braised beef trotters for me. She came back and told me that the inscription hanging in the main hall on the first floor of Tinghe Pavilion has been removed. This morning, my aunt went to the intersection of the Ning Street to buy pancakes for me. She came back and told me that the stall owner changed his shouting." Hong Shi seemed to understand something after hearing this. "Yes, I went to Tinghe Pavilion 2 days ago, and I felt that something was missing in the main hall. It turned out to be the calligraphy written by Lee Hemming." Then, Hong Fu also joined in. "I often go to the pancake stall at the corner of the street. The stall owner used to shout that the Lee family's master loved his pancakes the most." Hearing this, Hong Ping was immediately convinced. "Alice, it's the second brother after all. Now my mother scolds me and always blames you." He took the opportunity to pour a glass of wine into his mouth, and was glared at by Hong Shen. "What did the eldest lady say?" Hong Fu asked curiously. "She said that the second brother is smart and the eldest brother is steady." Hong Ping sighed. "Only I have a can of water above my neck and a bag of lard below my neck," he said, but his hands did not stop moving, secretly filling his empty cup. Hong Fu's mouth curled up, and he had a hard time holding back his smile. "Lard is also good," Hong Lai comforted. "Whether it's muddled or not, at least the cooking smells good." This time, including the butler standing on the side, everyone laughed. After a few rounds of small talk, the topic inevitably turned back to the affairs of the Lee family. "I've been busy in the back garden of the Lee mansion for 2 days, Hong Fan said. "With the help of the Sand World, the tunnel has been backfilled by a small part. The rest will be finished and consolidated by the Lee family themselves," he said, and went alone with Hong Shen. "I heard from my father that the Lee family is very cautious. They searched the mansion but couldn't find any evidence on paper," Hong Fu said. His father Hong Cheng is the captain of the city defense department and is in charge of checking the Lee mansion. Now, on the one hand, because of Hong Fan's relationship, and on the other hand, his cultivation is about to break through to the Guantong realm before Hong and the fat boy finally got his father's attention and got some exclusive information. "That's true," it was Hong Sheng who replied. Lee Hemming was very careful. There was no letter, no contract, until the evening of the 4th day of the 1st lunar month, when the whole thing had clearly come to an end. Less than 7 people in the Lee family knew the truth. Even the group of Wudan cavalry that dug the tunnel was kept in the dark, thinking that they were digging the family's way out at a critical moment. He sighed, obviously shocked by Lee Hemming's ability to manage the family. "But this is not important anymore," Li Lichen, Li Shenji and others have all confessed. 3 days ago, the Zhangwu Academy released 2 carrier pigeons, and now Zijing should have sent people over. The wing room was silent for a while. After a while, Hong Ping asked Hong Fan. "The Li family of about 400 people are said to have been locked up back in the mansion. Are there designated people, times and places for daily purchases? I heard from outsiders yesterday that colluding with aliens is a serious crime of confiscating property and exterminating the clan. Will they all die?" Hong Shi, Hong Fu and others raised their heads when they heard this, obviously also concerned about this matter. "I don't think it will be that serious. It should be stopped at the main culprit," Hong Fan said. "Of course, the national law is the national law, but things like genocide are usually just written in the law. Throughout a dynasty, there are not many examples of actual punishment," He paused for a moment and held up 2 fingers. 2 reasons. The first is that although the matter is serious, Li Heming's plot failed in the end. Most of the Li family are innocent, and it is not appropriate to punish them collectively, Hong Fan said, and saw Hong Ping and Hong Fu nodding repeatedly. The second is that Jinhe is too far away from Shenzhen, and the place is really too small. The Li family has been the face of this city for hundreds of years. Which of the prominent families in the city doesn't have a daughter-in-law with the surname Li? How many children's mothers, grandmothers, and grandmothers are from the Li family? How many daughters of the family married into the Li family, not to mention the distant ones? Our Uncle Ming married a daughter of the Li family. After a few words, the atmosphere at the table became much brighter. Brother Fan still sees it clearly, Hong Fu praised. The Li family is in the middle of the situation, but they are very confused. I heard from my father that 7 groups of people tried to escape overnight in the past 2 days, but were all caught by his people. These 20 people went to the prison of the city guard mansion to accompany young Master Li. The next day was the 10th day of March. The trees in the courtyard were green after the rain. After lunch, Aunt Liu carried a basket of vegetables and went out of the city with Tang Dajian and 2 maids. They said that the season had come and they wanted to pick some water spinach and mix it with sesame oil tofu for the young master. So Hong Fan was left alone in Chori courtyard. Of course, he would never be idle. Because of the death of Li Heming and Xiao Shizhen, the Sand World plundered a lot of nutrients. Therefore, Hong Fan's martial arts progress has been very fast in recent days. Last night, he opened up half of the major acupoints of the second strange meridian Yin-Kiao meridian. It has only been 1 month and 3 days since the 7th day of February when he entered the Hunrin realm. Considering the shortage of martial arts resources in the Hunrin realm, he saved 3 or 4 months of hard training. It is true that a horse cannot grow fat without night grass, and a man cannot become rich without unexpected wealth, Hong Fan sighed. If Jinhai can kill a Li Heming every now and then, I won't have to wait until this year's autumn harvest, and I will become a congenital master. He took off his shirt and moved his joints. After entering the pure realm, Hong Fan's strength leaped again. Ordinary metal barbells can no longer bear the training needs. Fortunately, some time ago, the training equipment in the courtyard was fully upgraded by the craftsmen of the Kui family and changed to a steel pulley and hemp rope structure. In this way, at least there is no problem using it until the peak of the strength realm. Chapter 157 Handover. After half an hour of testing, Hong Fan was sweating all over. He had made great progress in strength, and his squat increased from 2,000 pounds to 4,000 pounds. In his previous life, he could easily squat and lift a car. Speed assessment has always been a difficult point. In this era, timekeeping is not easy. It's okay on sunny days, as wealthy families have vertical south-facing sundials. On rainy days without sunshine, they can only rely on the bell and drum tower to keep time. However, by chance, Hong Fan discovered that the bell and drum tower did not rely on a clepsydra, water clock, as he imagined, but a serious pendulum clock. After communicating with Wen Songhwan, he realized that he had slightly underestimated the technical level of the instrument supervisor. Although the theory of calculus in this world has only been born for more than 10 years, the more primitive differential method at that time had already been widely used in the instrument supervisor. Combined with simple mechanical analysis and trigonometric functions, it is a natural thing to derive the expression of simple harmonic oscillation. By now, Wen Songhwan and Jin Huang both understood and mastered the knowledge of the isochronism of the pendulum and the pendulum theorem of T equals 2 Greek letter pi LG 0.5. With the support of theory, and the fact that material science and precision processing capabilities are Dahua's strengths, the pendulum clock came out 7 or 8 years ago, but it has not yet been popularized among the people. After the new year, when Wen Songhwan and his friends received the transfer order, Hong Fan shamelessly asked them to help process and manufacture a small pendulum clock. It uses a spring for energy and a crude anchor escapement. But this thing can really tell time. After repeated tests, Hong Fan got his current maximum speed 76 km per hour. Except for alien species such as tiger-eating beasts, his speed has exceeded all war horses and even blew up Fang Xianzong's life. After the basic physical test, as usual, some pre-research projects were tested on the ground. Escape V0.4. As the name suggests, first use the life star to make sand at high speed under your feet, and then use the liquid phase of the sand body to achieve high-speed pipeline movement below the surface. However, practice is not as good as imagined. Limited by his cultivation, Hong Fan can only reach the upper limit of 2 meters per second. In the fast-paced battle of the Hunran realm, this has no tactical significance. But it is still a means of saving life. Just as Hong Fan washed himself and put on his clothes again, there was a knock on the door outside the Chori courtyard. 3 knocks in a round, not fast or slow, very regular. As soon as he heard it, he knew it was Chuda. Hong Fan responded and opened the courtyard door, but saw 3 people standing outside the door. In addition to Chuda, there were Hong Li and Hong Sheng. "Are you practicing?" Hong Li asked after a simple exchange of gifts. He saw the dust on Hong Fan's shoes and the light sweat on his temples. "Just finished the daily lesson," Hong Fan replied. "I came to you today for something." Hong Li smiled with satisfaction and waved him out. The city guardhouse just sent someone to deliver a message, saying that the Li family's affairs are probably coming to an end. The 4 of them walked towards the main gate while chatting. "Your Uncle Wu is in the government office. But this matter is serious, so more people need to go," Hong Li explained. Hong Fan nodded, without asking why the clan leader didn't go. Since the 4th day of the first lunar month, Hong Jian has stayed in Xiaoguangyan every day, returning to his previous state of disappearance. As for what he was doing specifically, Hong Fan could guess without asking. Not long after, several people arrived at the gate. The carriage had been prepared and was waiting on the street. Hong Fan and Hong Sheng stood beside the carriage, waiting for the elders to get on the carriage first according to etiquette. However, Hong Li did not move, and stretched out his hand to make a gesture of invitation. "Uncle, please go first," Hong Fan said when he saw this. Hong Li waved his hand, stroked his beard and smiled. Chuda saw that the 2 young masters didn't understand, and explained in a low voice, "Master Li will not go today." Hong Fan was only slightly startled when he heard this, and then he realized the meaning of this matter. This was to officially push him and Hong Sheng to the stage of the Hong family. The alley outside the Hong mansion was a little deserted today. There were no spectators, no gongs and drums. But at this moment, the Hong family was partially handing over power. Apparently, in the recent Fanchen Society incident, the previous generation of the family recognized the abilities of the Shengfen brothers and hoped to give them more responsibilities. Now is a good time. Hong Fan's mind was racing, and it was all running through his mind in the time it took for a gust of wind to blow through the alley. Considering that the clan leader had just exposed his innate peak cultivation, even if the younger generation messed up things, it would be relatively easy to cover it up. At this time, Hong Sheng finally understood what Hong Li meant. In the past, as the eldest son, he could attend most of the meetings of the family's senior leaders, but he did not have much decision-making power. The long-awaited opportunity had arrived, and Hong Sheng could not help but feel excited, but for some reason he glanced at his half-brother next to him first. Seeing that Hong Fan was dazed with a relaxed look on his face, he had to take the initiative to speak. "Uncle, this matter is serious, and it is best for the elders to handle it." He suppressed his emotions and bowed his hands to ask for help. "My husband and I am inexperienced and inconsiderate. I am afraid there will be mistakes." Hong Li just waved his hand casually. "The pillars are old, but they cannot be replaced. That is the only way to deal with the lack of successors." The old man smiled warmly. "It is because my Hong family is in its heyday, with one wave after another, that the young can be educated and the old can have leisure time. I am old, and I still have to deal with those troublemakers in the clan school, so you go." Hearing him say this, Hong Sheng said nothing, but his body was still hesitant. Hong Fan smiled at this. "Brother, don't act like a little girl. The Li family is declining, but the head of my Hong family has made great progress in cultivation. Even if you break the sky of Jinhe City at this time, we have the ability to make up for it," he said and gently pushed Hong Sheng. The latter blushed, bowed deeply to Hong Li, and finally got into the carriage. Then Hong Fan and Chuda got on the carriage one by one. Hong Li watched the carriage leave the alley. A quarter of an hour later, at the city guardhouse, the guards who led the way stopped at the gate. After thanking them, Hong Fan and the other 2 went into the inner room. There were already 7 people sitting in the room. Zhang Sun was sitting in the main seat in the middle. There were also Gong Sun Shi, Hong Wu, Liao Zhenghao, Qi Zihuan, Kui Jiayan, and Jinhe Tongzi Ren Yuan lying on the side. The few people were originally talking about things, and when they saw the 2 juniors coming in, they all greeted them with a pleasant face, and their attitude was a little better than before. Hong Fan knew that this was not only because of himself, but more because of Hong Jian. After Li Heming's death, the latter had become the only innate master in the city. And he was at the peak of innateness. In the past 30 years, apart from Hong Jian, only Ma Jingsha and Jinhe had reached this level of cultivation. What's more, his progress came from the deduction of Yan Liu Gong by his own strength. This will raise the upper limit of the entire Hong family and have a far-reaching impact on the future power structure of Jinhe City. Please sit down, nephews, Zheng Sun invited. Hong Fan greeted him respectfully, glanced at the two remaining seats on the outermost side, and chose the one on the outer side to sit down. At this time, his arm was gently pulled. "You sit inside," Hong Sheng whispered. "You are the elder brother." Hong Fan was a little surprised. "It's true that I am the elder brother in terms of age," Hong Sheng replied. "But you are more like the elder brother in terms of your behavior." He laughed at himself, without any reluctance. So Hong Fan followed Hong Sheng's wishes and changed his seat. Chapter 158 Repayment. 9 people sat in the room. 3 of them were surnamed Hong, and there was an extra Chiuda standing behind Hong Sheng. After Li's death, the power distribution in Jinhe City was just like this. Everyone sat down, and Gongsun Shi was the first to speak. "I have already reported this matter to the State Department of this court by pigeon. In Dahua, all martial artists who committed crimes are under the jurisdiction of this Hangwu court. Especially for top rebels like Fanshan Society, the general institutions of the court have no ability to restrain them at all. The State Department does not have a pigeon to Jinhe, and the reply is estimated to arrive tomorrow, but there must be a response," he continued to explain. Jinhe City is 1,200 miles away from Zhejiang, and it takes about 25 or 26 hours for a pigeon to travel one way. The court's official documents will be slightly slower, but it will not exceed 3 days. Zhao Shire is an important prisoner. According to the convention, there is no need for Jinhe to send people to escort him. I guess the State Department will send a direct Imperial Guard to escort the prisoner back. When the 2 rebels, one dead and one alive, are brought back to Zhejiang, this matter will be considered a success. After listening to Gongsun Shi's report, everyone nodded silently, feeling relieved. After him, Zheng Sun mentioned the second item. "Everyone, Li Heming's body is still with me." He looked at everyone and asked, "What do you think should be done?" Generally speaking, the dead are naturally sent back to their family. However, the Li family is still under criminal surveillance and has neither the ability nor the qualifications to take care of the former patriarch's funeral. "The crime of colluding with foreign races should be cremated," Ren Yuanlong said. No one agreed. "The custom of Dahua is burial. For ordinary people, cremation and pulverizing bones and scattering ashes are almost the same. Except for the disciples of the monks who valued the emptiness of the 4 elements, and the lower classes of society who were too poor to afford the cost of burial, no one would choose cremation. It's not necessary to go to this extent, is it?" Kui Jian couldn't help but say. "After all, we have known him for so many years." This he of course refers to Li Heming. Kui Jian is 45 years old this year, 4 years younger than Li Heming. The relationship between the two back then can be compared to that of Kui Yudang and Hong Fan at this time. Although they are both sons of wealthy families, Kui has always been a loyal friend and admirer of Li. After watching the latter defeat his peers in Liangzhou and be listed high on the Xianjiao list, this admiration reached its peak. Even today, it has not faded. "Let's bury him in peace," Qi Zihuan said softly. Including Hongwu, several people nodded in agreement. "Burial is not impossible." Seeing this, Gongsun Shi interjected. "But Li Heming has committed a heinous crime. He must be removed from the Li family tree, and he cannot be buried in the family tomb or offered sacrifices," he said in a stern tone. "It is the duty of the head of the Martial Arts Academy to use punishment to intimidate martial artists. Everyone else present can reminisce about the past, but the martial arts supervisor cannot." Everyone had nothing to say and acquiesced to this decision. The next item was the third item. The items seized from the Li family have been counted. This time it was Ren Yuanlong who spoke again. "Because we have made preparations for the relocation of the clan, the collection this time was relatively smooth. A total of 32,350 taels of silver were collected, plus other property. The total is about 97,000 taels. Everyone present was a powerful figure in Jinhe City, but they were still stunned by this number. Counting the Li family's old house and other real estate that have not yet been sold, 100,000 taels is equivalent to more than half of the Li family's assets. This should be the accumulation of several generations of the Li family," Hong Fan thought. After committing such a serious crime, the innocent people below may be able to survive. But the tree fell, the Monkey King died, and the monkeys had to pay a price. According to the criminal law, the property seized during the search should be collected by the Ministry of Revenue. Jingsha cleared his throat and said. And the Ministry of Martial Arts. He glanced at Gong Shi and added. However, this Fanqiansh case involves a wide range of people, and many families have contributed, so it is reasonable to set aside some as compensation. One of the important things I invited you to do today is to determine the distribution plan. Hong Sheng was confused by the words of the city guard. Since ancient times, once a criminal family was searched, the property must be taken away by the higher-ups. I don't know where this compensation comes from. And Hong Fan naturally understood. According to the law, Jinhai does not have the right to dispose of this windfall. But people are flexible. At this time, Ren Yuanlong was talking about the less than 100,000 taels seized during the search. By then, Jingsha might only report 50,000 or even 30,000 taels. Shenjing is too far from zillion. Those bigwigs who are in high positions in the government may not even have heard of the Jinhai Li family, and no one would go to the trouble of sending people to confirm it, so this is what happened today. Hong Fan suddenly realized, no wonder Hong Li didn't come himself, and asked Chuda to come with him. Chuda is undoubtedly a professional in family finances. He was thinking this way, and Hong Wu spoke up. Hong Fan discovered the initial clues of this case. He locked on to the two people from Fanqian society. He also made the final arrangement. In the specific implementation, my eldest brother was the first, and my Hong family's Zhu Aiki also made great efforts. Please consider it, Lord City Guard. Hong Wu's words were firm and justified. Just listening to his words, it would be unjust if the Hong family didn't take half of the 100,000 taels. Nephew Hong Fan has made great contributions, there is no doubt about that, Liao Zhanghao said, and then changed the subject. But merit is merit, there will be rewards from above. What Lord Zhang just said was compensation. The room suddenly became lively. When it comes to money, even Chi Zuohan, who is usually taciturn, becomes eloquent. How can you see that he is sympathetic when talking about Li Heming's funeral? Hong Sheng sat silently aside, and for a moment he felt as if a new group of people were in the room. After discussing for half an hour, everyone came to a preliminary intention. The Hong family can get about 30% of the wealth. Hong Wu was basically satisfied with this. Then Zhang Zihun proposed the fourth item. Zio 12 is very stubborn and still refuses to confess, he said loudly and called the guards outside. After a while, a middle-aged police chief with a goatee came into the hall. This person was Yan Liu, who was in charge of Feng Zihu's case and summoned Hong Fan. Lord Zheng, Lord Hong, Tian Liu performed formal etiquette to his two immediate superiors as soon as he entered the door, and then bowed to the other 5 big men. When it came to Hong Fan, he changed to a particularly solemn address. Mr. Hong Fan, his tone was warm and respectful, even with a hint of devotion. This man is Yan Liu, the head of the police force. He is the most capable person in the government office, Zhang Sun introduced. He is in charge of questioning Zhao Shire these days. He also noticed that Yan Liu's attitude towards Hong Fan was different, and he was a little surprised. Hong Wu was even more surprised. He was Yan Liu's boss, and they had known each other for many years and worked together, so he knew him very well. But now he inexplicably felt that his subordinates seemed to respect Hong Fan more than themselves. Chapter 159, The Reincarnation of the Ancestor. The whole Hong family knew that the second young master was good at dealing with people. Hong Wu was no exception. According to his superficial observation, Hong Fan only gave more money and goods to those who were not as high as him. I am also a respectful person. The second young master Hong was puzzled. On the other side, Tian Liu was reporting. Zio Shire is a bit difficult to deal with. He still eats the tea and food sent to him every day, and he doesn't seem to have any intention of dying, but no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't pry his mouth open. Sometimes the more painful it is, the more the prisoner laughs. The key is that the prisoner has lost his martial arts skills and his injuries are not light, but he is not on danger of death for the time being. I dare not use heavy punishments such as whipping, caning, branding, and shackles easily, Captain Yan said and clenched his fist. Could the prisoner have used some special method to eliminate the pain? Guangxin Shi asked. Sometimes it's similar to the burning pain of Yanliu Guang. I don't think so, Tian Liu replied. When I used the tongs and needles, he would sweat and his muscles would cramp when the pain was severe. I didn't expect this traitor to be such a tough guy. Hong Wu patted the armrest of his chair. For a moment, everyone was a little distressed. Except for Zhang Zhan and Ren Yuanlong, the others were all martial artists, and they had more ruthless methods. The key was that they were afraid of being too ruthless in killing Xiao 12. The merit of capturing someone alive was much greater than handing over a corpse. Captain Dian is reliable and I trust him, Zhang Zhan said. If it really doesn't work, then forget it. The life of the prisoner is still the most important thing. For him, prying open Xiao 12's mouth was just icing on the cake. However, Hong Fan didn't think so. If he wanted to find a culprit for the defeat of Fenshin society in Jinhei, he would not think of anyone else. Since he had become an enemy of the Nano Xiao family, he could not easily give up every opportunity to obtain intelligence. When the criminals are brought to Zijing or even Shenjing, even if some information is really squeezed out, what is the chance that it will be transmitted to a small border town at the same time? In Hong Fan's mind, completing the interrogation in Jinhei first and then executing Xiao 12 personally is the most profitable plan. After all, he doesn't care about any credit, but he cares about the remaining half of the Dragon Soul Fruit. Captain Dawn, go and do your work, Zhang Zhan ordered, waving his hand. At this time, Hong Fan interrupted. Sir, wait a minute, this matter may turn around. Everyone looked at him. Captain Dawn is an expert in torture. Hong Fan looked at Yan Liu. But I have some immature ideas, maybe we can give it a try, sir. Just say it. Tian Liu immediately stopped and replied. At this time, Hong Wu, Liao Zhenghao, Ren Yuanlong and others were more or less disapproving. It's not that they despise him. In Jinhei City today, some people may look down on Zhang Zhan, but no one dares to look down on Hong Fan. But what can a young man who has not even reached adulthood know about torture, a deviant way no matter how talented he is? However, his importance is there, even if he is telling lies with his eyes open, everyone has to listen. Hong Fan considered his words and spoke. In the matter of torture, physical torture is naturally an indispensable means, but means are only means. Our goal is to break the prisoner's mind. After all, only in this way can we get what we want. His thoughts gradually became smoother, and his words gradually became smoother. In addition to corporal punishment, there are many other ways to explore torture methods. I will give you a few ideas. The first is isolation. Even prisoners in prison, although they have no freedom, still retain some basic social interactions. For example, with a prison boss, jailers, other prisoners, etc. If we can completely deprive prisoners of social interaction with other living things, over time, the anxiety of the isolated person and his desire for interpersonal communication may prompt him to speak up. Hong Fan paused. Tian Liuzhang was listening to him attentively. The next step of isolation is sensory deprivation, Hong Fan continued. As mentioned above, social interaction is a basic human need, and social interaction is a complex interaction between people and the outside world. If we cut off even the most basic human interaction, the effect will definitely be even better. Imagine putting a person in a box deep in the cellar, so that he can't feel any stimulation from the outside world except breathing. If it lasts for a long time, people will feel that the days are long, Tian Liu thought thoughtfully. Of course, for Xiao 12, the isolation time may not be enough, and sensory deprivation may not be possible immediately. More experiences from his previous life came to Hong Fan's mind. But there are other ways. Let me talk about the second idea: overload. Traditional torture seeks to increase the peak of pain, while the so-called overload seeks the accumulation of pressure. In fact, there are many ways. The simplest one is sleep deprivation. Let several groups of people take turns to accompany the prisoner, and force him to wake up whenever he feels sleepy. This can easily cause him to collapse after 20 to 30 hours. You can also use stress posture. Use cloth, ropes or shackles to tie the prisoner in an extremely uncomfortable posture, or curl the prisoner into a small cage. Keeping it for a long time can easily destroy a person's psychological defenses. In addition, sensory bombardment is also a good way. Continuously make noise in the prisoner's ears, or shine a strong light into his eyes. Well, this seems to be more difficult to achieve. As he spoke, he suddenly realized that the principle of overload is actually somewhat similar to that of a water knife. The latter also abandons the traditional cutting hardness and pursues cutting energy. Sure enough, the principles are the same. Hong Fan thought of this and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Ren Yuanlong couldn't help but shudder when he saw this smile. On the other side, Tian Liu's eyes were already shining. Hong Wu, who was originally leaning against the back of the chair, also sat up straight unconsciously. There is another way, which I think is particularly worth trying on Xiao 12, Hong Fan added. This idea is mental humiliation, and the simplest representative is forced nudity. As the name suggests, I won't explain it anymore. Xiao 12 is a man of noble birth and extremely proud in his heart. This trick may have a miraculous effect on him. After these words, there was no loud breathing in the room. Thanks to the United States and the Guantanamo military base, these torture concepts were not rare in the previous life. Hong Fan has not yet said anything about sexual humiliation and religious humiliation that are too contrary to human ethics. What do you think, gentlemen? He asked at last. No one answered. When his eyes swept over them, Zheng Sun, Ren Yuanlong and others unconsciously moved their buttocks, felt their lips were very dry, and quickly drank a cup of tea with trembling hands. Hong Wu shook his head and smacked his lips, obviously still stuck in the aftertaste. Tian Liu, on the other hand, looked like he was overflowing with information, looking at Hong Fan with the eyes of a reincarnated master. What you think and say is as high as the moon in the sky, as wide as the ocean, Captain Yuan praised repeatedly. My eyes have been opened. Oh, how amazing it is. Many things Hong Fan just said were completely beyond his understanding and imagination of torture. But he thought about it a little more carefully based on his own experience, and found that it was very reasonable and very feasible. At this moment, the #1 torture master in Jinhe City felt that his career was about to reach a new peak, and he wanted to go back to the prison to try it out. Oh, now I know that there are people in the world who are born with knowledge, Gongsun Shi sighed, looking at Hong Fan with a slightly complicated look. Yes, you are really stupid for so many years. Hong Wu also came to his senses at this time and said, Uncle, this city should be given to you. You are so kind, so kind. Hong Fan smiled back. I just thought about it when I was free, as expected of the dragon Star Lord. You are really different. Zheng Sun laughed and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead calmly. He didn't know which good family would think about these things when they had nothing to do. Chapter 160, Beacon Fire. 5 days later, March 15th. Jinhe City. The sky was clear and blue like a pasture. Eagles flew by, herding the flocks of birds returning north. City guardhouse. The same people as 5 days ago, except Chu De was missing and Hong Jian was added. I first tried several methods mentioned by Master Hong. Obviously, there was some effect, but it was still not enough. Tian Liu stood in the hall and introduced to the adults. So I used the last one, mental humiliation. His eyebrows flew up. The effect is really outstanding. According to Master Hong's instructions, I put a hood on the prisoner, stripped him naked and walked him around the yard for a few laps. In the end, he confessed before he even left the government office, Tian Liu said excitedly, and bowed to Hong Fan again. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard this. What did Xiao Shire confess? Tell me in detail, Gongsun Shi asked. He first confessed the location of the Nano Xiao family's nest, Tian Liu said. About 100 or so years ago, the remnants of the rebels fled to the southern part of Xianzhou, and later moved to an island on the sea. The island is called Jinjiao, and the Nano Xiao family has a population of thousands there, and has brought more than 10,000 people with them. Do you know the exact location? Gongsun Shi became more and more anxious. But there is no such thing, Tian Liu replied. Xiao Shire said that Jinjiao Island is not small, but he doesn't know the exact location. How could he not know? Did he come from the island? Liao Zhenghao asked. Report to Liao Shubai. Tian Liu bowed his hands, not being humble or arrogant. The prisoner said that he traveled in and out by boat, and it took more than 10 days each way. He was not allowed to go on the deck at will, so he didn't know the exact direction and distance. Liao Zhenghao sighed and patted the armrest. Captain Don, have you found out the organizational structure and strength of the Nano Xiao family? Hong Fan interrupted at this time. Yes, Tian Liu replied attentively. According to the prisoner, the Nano Xiao clan still follows the genealogy of the kings during the rebellion, and important matters are decided by the princes of each branch. In addition, the Nano Xiao clan currently has 2 celestial beings and more than 10 Yuanzi, all of whom have practiced a purple sky dragon transformation sutra. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere in the room became a little cold. With the power of Jinhe City, no one can stop any Nano Xiao clan Yuanzi. However, this level of traitor should not be the worry of the people present. Are there any accomplices missing in the plan of Jinhe? Zheng Sun asked. Xiao 12 said there are no more, Tian Liu said seriously. He said he left Zhanzhou 2 years ago, and went north to Beijing at the same time, but only he and Xiao Shizhen were assigned to Liangzhou and Zhejiang. Everyone nodded, feeling relieved. The rebellion in Beijing happened last year, and it was not large in scale. Everyone present knew about it. By the way, did you ask about the hatred of Xinjiang? Hong Fan asked again. I will never forget the young master's request, Tian Liu replied. It's just that the prisoner refuses to confess this matter. I wanted to be more ruthless, but his mental state was already very bad this morning, so I really didn't dare to force him any more. Hong Fan had to give up. Tian Liu. Did you find out the real names of these two people? Hong Wu took over the conversation. The Xiao family is a dignified family, and they are all descendants of the kings. They can't really be called 12 and 13, right, my lord? I asked. Tian Liu had a sneer on his face. Xiao 12's real name is Xiao Zhengxi, and Xiao 13's real name is Xiao Kefi. Everyone was stunned. There were many sounds of spitting in the room. At this moment, someone rushed in from outside. Urgent military information, the voice came before the person arrived. 2 breaths later, a soldier rushed into the door. My lords, a beacon has been set off in the cold spring oasis in the north. It's the first class, he shouted hurriedly, without even having time to salute. Are you sure it's Class A? Liao Zhanghao's eyes widened, and he stood up and shouted. Sir, it must be correct, the soldier replied. Everyone on the north wall saw it. There was a panic in the room. As far as Hong Fan knew, the beacons on the Jinhe side were divided into different levels. Among them, Class C had only 1 smoke, indicating that there were scattered enemy troops. Class B had 2 smoke, indicating that there were at least nearly 100 snake people, who might seize the oasis. Class A had 3 smokes rising at the same time, indicating that a large army was approaching. Why did the Class A beacon suddenly start? Zheng Zhun was a little panicked. Could it be a mistake? He had only been in Jinhe City for 6 years, and by then Ma Jingsha had already gained momentum and reversed the attack and defense. It's okay if Class C was a mistake, but Class A is impossible. Liao Zhanghao rejected it flatly. Lengquan is the northernmost oasis, only 160 miles away from Jinhe City. If the Snake People's army approaches, the remaining 3 oasis outposts will be undefendable. The Snake People should be able to march to the city in 4 days at the earliest, he shouted to the messenger. Su Si, go and write down the military information, and send it to Zhejiang by pigeon now, the soldier answered loudly and turned away. In the hall, not only Zhang Zhun was at a loss, but Ren Yuanlong's lips turned pale. How did it suddenly come to this? Ren Tongzi murmured, glancing at Hong Jian, who was sitting side by side with Zhang Zhun and looked normal, and his panic was slightly reduced. The masterminds have been caught. How could the Snake People fulfill their promise? Is there still a fish that slipped through the net? Not necessarily. Gongsun Shi shook his head. Maybe it has something to do with the white snake parasitic in Xiao Shizhen's body. Hong Fan nodded in agreement. At this time, Zheng Zhun finally calmed down. Without Fanshan Society and the Li family as internal support, the Snake People have no confidence in winning. Why are they sending out troops so easily? He asked Liao Zhanghao. You don't know, Lord City Guard. The Snake People often fight without caring about winning or losing, not to mention that the Fanshan Society traders may have given other rewards, the latter replied. For these cold-blooded reptiles, war is for blood sacrifice. If you win, you use other people's blood, and if you lose, you use your own blood, that's all, Liao Zhanghao sneered. Then what are our chances of winning? Zheng Zhun asked again. It's hard to say. This time it was Gongsun Shi who took over. Li Heming said that he contacted the private army of the tribe of a silver-scaled son of God, so I think the total number of troops will not exceed 20,000. Considering that Shakao Guard and Yukon City also control the important roads, the troops will have to be dispersed. Ren Yuanlong felt relieved when he heard this. So it's only a few thousand at most. There are 4,000 defenders in our city, plus the soldiers of the children of each family. It's not difficult to gather 6,000. How can the Snake People come down from the city with the power of the city walls and the ability of the military equipment? He laughed out loud. But no one in the room agreed. The co-governor has only been in Jinhe for less than 2 years, but he underestimated the Snake People, Liao Zhanghao said. According to the court's estimate, the number of Snake People is probably in the millions, much less than our Dahua, but they are truly a nation of soldiers. It takes half a year for our human race to train a barely usable sword and shield soldier, while the Snake People are born with scales. sharp claws and fangs, and their ability to hunt and kill is all acquired in their eggs. According to previous battles, snake people can fight 1 against 3 with the same cultivation level, if the number is 1 to 1. Even if we take into account the geographical advantage, we are still at a disadvantage. Ren Yuanlong's face looked ugly again. Captain Liao, should we ask for reinforcements as soon as possible? For example, to General Chu at Shakao Garrison, Ren Yuanlong asked. They must not be moved, Liao Zhanghao replied seriously. They have been having conflicts with the snake people since the beginning of the year. Now I think it should be within the arrangement of Fenshin Society. P.S. Updated by the Operation Officer. Good morning. The last big plot of this volume is about to unfold. Thank you for the support of new and old friends. Chapter 161 Thermal Vision. What about other cities? Ren Yuanlong asked again. I'm afraid it's difficult. Liao Zhanghao shook his head. First of all, the nearest Yukon city is also a key point on the border, so we must have people. Secondly, when the snake people go south, everyone is always in danger, unless there is a military order from above. The border cities cannot and will not mobilize support on their own. Ren Yuanlong still didn't give up. In an emergency, can't we do what is convenient, Sir Ren? It's not up to us to decide whether it is convenient or not, Liao Zhanghao laughed. You can't blame them. Everyone has to take responsibility for the safety of their own family first. The nearest Hexi camp is 400 miles away from us, but the military information needs to be transmitted to Zijing, and we will go there after a military decision is made, even if there is no delay. It will take at least 10 days for the reinforcements to start. Ren Yuanlong was silent. The dispatch of a large army is not like an individual, it is an extremely complicated matter. The reaction speed mentioned by Liao Zhanghao just now is actually not slow from any angle. However, Hong Fan still felt strange. There were few wars between the Dahua and the snake people. He had heard about this from his uncle Hong Wei. But considering the constant friction between the two tribes, it was a bit unreasonable for the garrison camp to be so far from the border. He asked. The answer was from Hong Wu. There are 2 reasons for this. First, the arable land becomes less and less as you go west in Liangzhou, and the grain production is insufficient. We only have 4,000 soldiers in Jinhe City, not because it is enough, but because we cannot support more. The daily garrison at the border consumes too much food. At this point, he paused. On the other hand, not deploying heavy troops at the border is also intended to guide the snake people to attack. Hong Fan was stunned by this. Since the Marshal Saint Bailey Shi broke out of the Jinsha Hanhei, Jinhe is no longer a city that must be defended. Hong Wu smiled bitterly. We are 200 miles away from the western wild swamp. This 200 miles of land is a natural barrier. Instead of advancing the battle line to the desert, it is better to use Jinhe City as a front line. This is equivalent to extending the snake people's battle line by 200 miles, which will give them more room to deploy military strategies. To the higher-ups, Jinhe is just one of the more than 200 cities in the 9 provinces of Dahua. That's all. No one responded. At this moment, the messenger Su Si, who had just left, came running again. My lords, the first-class beacon fire of Langquan Oasis has been extinguished, he reported with a sad tone. This time, no one needed to explain. Everyone understood the inner meaning. The beacon fire was extinguished, which meant that the Oasis outpost had been captured. I understand, you go. Liao Zhanghao waved his hand and stood up suddenly, causing his robe to shake. We know nothing about the enemies coming, so there's no point in guessing. I'll go arrange the city defense and send out scouts now. I'll call you all back tomorrow when I have a report. The next day, March 16th. The sky was full of dark clouds, and the rain was about to fall. It was clearly afternoon, but the sky and the earth were as dark as dusk. In the northern sky, 3 smokes rose up and merged into one, connecting the desert and Yunchang like an umbilical cord. An umbilical cord that breeds bloody battles. The long wind came from the south, blowing sand and rolling stones all the way, howling continuously. Finally, it was crushed on the city wall by an iron palm. Guard, all the adults are here, the voice of the messenger came from behind. Got it, Liao Zhanghao patted the bricks and turned to walk into the tower. The tower was dim, and torches had to be used for lighting even in the daytime. Lord Liao, I heard that the investigation was not going well. Zhang Sun saw the main master coming in and stood up to ask. Sir Zhang, it's more than just unpleasant, Liao Zhanghao replied, his voice as hard as iron. There are 2 teams of 20 people in total. Each team is a good fighter in the Guantong realm. and the rest are veteran soldiers. Everyone is equipped with a good horse and wears light armor. Even if they fight head-on, they are enough to deal with 6 Guantong Realm warriors, but the last one didn't come back, he said, his hands behind his back clenched tightly. None of the 20 people came back? Isn't it too aggressive? Ren Yuanlong asked in surprise, and was immediately glanced at by Liao Zhanghao, and immediately stopped talking. There are no stupid people who can be selected as scouts. The latter suppressed his anger and just replied in a cold voice. They have all met with the snake people before, and they know the importance of the mission and understand that everything should be done with the preservation of intelligence, but the Lord of Tongzi may not know that approaching the snake army in the Jinhe Desert is a job with your head tied to your belt. At the end, Liao Zhanghao's voice became heavier. Ren Yuanlong took a deep breath, but stood up and bowed deeply. Please forgive me, Master Liao. I don't know anything about military affairs. I hope you can teach me. Only then did Liao Zhanghao's anger dissipate. Ignorance is not a crime. Snake people are different from ours. Their eyes cannot see far and their hearing is not sharp, but they have special senses of a different species and can see the heat and cold of external objects, he explained. Hongfan understood immediately. This is thermal vision. Snakes in the previous life had a special organ called the cheek pit. This is a triangular depression located between the external nostrils and the eyes on both sides of the head, which can directly respond to infrared radiation. This receptor is extremely sensitive to temperature and can immediately sense even a change of a few thousandths of a degree Celsius. And what's more shocking is that the perception of the cheek pit is not flat, but three-dimensional. Therefore, snakes can determine the direction and position of warm-blooded prey, and can bite a mouse running by even if they are blindfolded. The snake people in this world obviously have this ability. So once humans enter the perception range of snake people, it is almost impossible to hide, Hong Fan said. This is really tricky. Second Master is right, but there is more to it, Liao Zhanghao continued. Snakemen will also spread out scouts when they move. These scouts are often slender and can hide under the sand and bushes. If you don't look carefully, you can't detect them at all. In addition, a small number of snakemen can change the color of their scales. And they look no different from grass, trees, soil and rocks from a distance of 10 feet. Add to that the keen sense of smell that far exceeds that of our tribe, and scouts who want to get close to the snakeman army are undoubtedly gambling their lives. Ren Yuanlong's face turned pale after hearing these words. I just talked about the larger snakemen, Liao Zhanghao sighed. Snakemen also raise snakes, most of which are highly poisonous. These snakes are scattered outside the military camp and are very hidden, but if you are bitten, even with the physique of a warhorse, you can't survive for more than a cup of tea. Hong Wu, Chi Huing and others, as well as the soldiers standing around, all felt sympathetic when they heard this. Snake people are as quiet as dead things, but as fast as thunder. They are natural ambushes, Hong Wu said. When we followed Lord Jingsha to the north, it was very dangerous even if a small team with all members in the Guantong realm went out to investigate, and at that time, we were only facing border tribes, not the Son of God's private army. Everyone was speechless for a moment. The only sound in the hall was the wind blowing through the window. At this time, Hong Sheng stood up with his sword pressed, and said resolutely, if Guantong doesn't work, what about the Hunran realm? I am willing to lead the team. Chapter 162 Asking for Order. Hong Sheng was still young, and had never encountered a snakeman on the battlefield with real weapons. But he had seen many snakes in Taishan. For a low-level warrior, the venomous fangs that suddenly bit from branches and bushes were indeed dangerous. But with Hong Sheng's eyesight and skills, the attack speed of ordinary snakes seemed to him as slow as an old lady crossing the street, and he could easily pinch them. I admire you for having such a heart, Mr. Sheng, Liao Zhanghao replied, not very excited. Of course, a warrior in the Hunran realm is not something that ordinary snakemen can deal with, but unless you have special skills, you can't escape their perception after all. The attackers this time are the private army of the Son of God, and they may be led by snakemen nobles of the 4th or 5th priests. If they target you, you may not be able to get back even if you have a spiritual connection with heaven and man, he declined Hong Sheng politely. If an ordinary Hunran realm warrior asked for it on his own, Liao Zhanghao would not mind giving it a try. But if the eldest son of the Hong family died in such a matter, he, as a garrison, would definitely not end well. I heard that snake people are not good at running, Hong Fan asked. Can they catch up with war horses? This matter cannot be generalized, Gongsun Shi replied. Compared with us humans and even four-legged beasts, snake people are naturally not good at running. Ordinary snake people not only cannot run fast, but also have poor endurance. His words are consistent with Hong Fan's consistent understanding of the reptiles he saw in his previous life. The spine can only bend left and right instead of vertically, which limits the running movement. It does not sweat when it is hot or shiver when it is cold, and relies on the environment, sunbathing, digging holes, to adjust the body temperature. Its advantage is that it has very low energy consumption and can tolerate hunger and drought. Its disadvantage is that the various biochemical reactions in the body cannot run stably at the most suitable temperature, and its ability to move can be easily affected by body temperature. But I just talked about the low-level snake people. Gongsun Shi changed the subject and continued. Once the snake people have undergone blood sacrifice, they are like us who have practiced martial arts, and have undergone a complete transformation. Snake people respect blood, specialize in physical training, and have their own system. For example, the 6 sacrifice snake people do not have the various wonderful uses of innate true energy, nor can they fly in the air, but their physical strength is far superior to that of the horizontal martial artists in Dahua, and their comprehensive combat power can be compared with that of the Yuanzi master. After the martial arts supervisor finished speaking, Qi Huiyan also added, high-level snake people look simple when fighting, but their strength, defense, physique, and endurance are all balanced and strong. We rely on true energy and true energy to fight, and innate masters will be exhausted after running at full speed for half an hour, and they still need to ride horses to travel long distances. However, the noble species among the snake people have never needed to rely on external things. The two people's words made Hong Shang stop. He has blood, and he didn't volunteer just now to seek fame. But as a high-level combat force, if he knows that the risk and benefit are disproportionate and still wants to show off, it would be foolish. How to solve it? Wen's Hongwen frowned and asked. With the characteristics of the snake people mentioned by everyone, he couldn't think of a solution for a while. It's nothing more than sending more people. If 10 are not enough, send 100. Liao Zhanghao glanced at the sky outside the building and replied in a low voice. With good horses, some people will come back. Do we have to use our own weaknesses to attack the enemy's strengths? Wen's Hongwen asked again, a little impatient. When the snake people come, they can't fight with us under the city anyway. When the time comes, we will be high up on the city tower, and we can see how many people and how many high-level combat forces have come at a glance. Why do we have to exchange human lives, Master Wen? I don't care. Liao Zhanghao was not annoyed when he heard this, but just smiled. With a powerful enemy at hand, anyone in this city can leave, except me, the garrison commander, and everyone in the city defense department. No one can leave. The worst-case scenario is that we will die in battle for our country. What's wrong with being confused? But please know that there is more to this world than just under our feet. He walked to the door of the attic and stood there, pointing his arm to the north. The oasis in the north is the sentry post of Jinhei City. Isn't my Jinhei City also a sentry post for Liangzhou and even Dahua? Liao Zhanghao's breathing became heavy. It doesn't matter if 20 people die or 100 people die. The sooner we find out the specific enemy situation, the sooner we can send a message to the rear. The people of Fenshin society said that only the private army of the Son of God came. So is that it? Without specific information to send back, how will the superiors dispatch reinforcements and arrange the rear? He asked in a loud voice. Wen's Hongwen calmed down after hearing this and only replied, I know. The wind kept hitting the window, but the atmosphere was still dull. Don't worry too much. Liao Zhanghao exhaled a breath of foul air and said a soothing word. I will take care of this matter. He paced back and forth, and was about to call for orders when he heard someone ask again. My lords, are the snake people really unable to fly in the air? It was Hong Fan. At least not within 6 or 7 sacrifices, Gongsun Shi replied. I can't guarantee it after that. Do the snake people have any means of long-range attack? Hong Fan asked again. Very little. Gongsun Shi shook his head. The key to making a good bow is to have good glue, and the western wild swamp doesn't produce this. In addition, the snake people are not good at forging, so they can't make good javelins. Qi Huiyan and Kui Jiayan both nodded. They can make catapults, Wen's Hongwen added. There are samples left in my office. They are made of snake skin and rope. The maximum range is about 200 to 300 meters, but the accuracy is terrible. What about the noble species of snake people? Hong Fan asked again. Liao Zhanghao was a little annoyed, but thinking of Hong Fan's unexpected conversation with Yan Liu that day, he still suppressed his anger and answered. I don't know if it is at the level of Son of God. I saw a 6-sacrifice snake man on the battlefield many years ago. It is almost equivalent to the Yuanzi realm. A fine steel spear was thrown by it with a whistling wind and thunder, spanning 1,000 meters and even penetrating the city wall. Hong Fan nodded in understanding. The whistling wind and thunder obviously refer to sonic booms, which means that the 6-sacrifice snake man can throw supersonic attacks. As for penetrating the city wall from 1,000 meters away, it seems terrifying at first glance, but this is a horizontal projection. Air defense has always been a difficult task. As far as Hong Fan knows, in the previous life, a pistol with a muzzle velocity of 300 meters per second fired into the sky, without considering the rolling caused by the crosswind, can only reach a height of 400 meters at most. As for when the bullet falls back to the ground, it can only have a speed of about 50 meters per second. If it encounters a thick-skinned guy, it may not even be able to make him bleed. Assuming the initial speed of the supersonic javelin is 400 meters per second, considering the air resistance and the work done by gravity, Hong Fan roughly calculated and estimated that the height that the javelin can reach is about 800 or 900 meters. However, when the height reaches more than 700 meters, the speed of the javelin is only 50 meters per second. With Hong Fan's current level of powered hang glider V1.8, it is easy to avoid. Besides, he doesn't quite believe that the Zhao brothers can attract the noble snake people in the Yuanzi realm. Thank you for your answers. Hong Fan stood up, bowed to Liao Zhanghao, and then asked in a calm voice. Human life is precious and should not be thrown away lightly. Let me go for the reconnaissance this time. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 163, Controlling the Wind with Reason. Hong Fan's words aroused many objections in the tower. No, Hong Wu, Gongsun Shi, and Wen Zhongwen shouted in a deep voice. I have always known the power of the sand world in the desert. Liao Zhanghao also tried to dissuade him slowly. But this matter is not worth the risk for the second young master. Since Jing Shigong reversed the situation and swept the sea of sand, the sand world has become a banner. When the foreign army is at the gates of the city, the meaning of the desert sands flying high on the top of the city is far more than just killing the enemy. He walked to Hong Fan's side and pressed the latter's shoulder. The war is imminent, and we must not act on impulse. Hong Fan felt the strength on his shoulder and sat down without resistance. Don't worry, Lord Liao, I have never been a person who acts on impulse, he smiled. Since I recommend myself, I must be absolutely sure. What are you sure about? Wen Zhongwen stood up and walked forward, looking at Hong Fan with a reproachful look for the first time. Could it be that you have quietly broken through to the state of communication between heaven and man? How can it be so outrageous? Hong Fan waved his hand. I just know how to fly. Everyone was stunned when he heard this. What did you just say, nephew? Hong Wu asked in confusion. He suspected that he had heard it wrong, and he really couldn't think of any other homophones for know how to fly. I said I can fly. Hong Fan stood up again. Fly, like a bird. This time Liao Zhanghao didn't stop him again. Fly, Gongsun Shi repeated. You mean like the Yuanzi Grandmaster? Hong Fan nodded. Probably. I haven't seen the Yuanzi realm either, he replied. Isn't this outrageous? This is even more outrageous. Wen Zhongwen's face was full of absurdity. You might as well say that you have broken through to the state of communication between heaven and man. After a long while, everyone calmed down a little and allowed Hong Fan to continue his statement. After I broke through the state of complete chaos, I created a new killing method. It's called dynamic sand wings. Facing many hesitant looks, Hong Fan paced in the hall while explaining. It uses sand as wings and fire as power. It can fly at a maximum of 1,000 feet, and the cruising speed is about 320 miles per hour, 80 kilometers per hour. At full power, the maximum speed can reach more than twice the cruising speed. On a windy day like today, it's no problem to fly for an hour or so. The snake people are now in Shanghai Oasis again, only 100 miles away from us, and an hour is enough for a round trip. Even though he reported the parameters of the sand wings lower, no one dared to believe him. Good nephew, it's not that your uncle doesn't believe you, Hong Wu frowned. Let's not talk about whether my Hong family's Yan Liu Gong has this ability. Even if Jingsha Gong was at the peak of his innate cultivation in his heyday, I haven't heard that he can fly. Military affairs are dangerous. Master Hong, don't brag. Gongsun Shi had a wider knowledge of martial arts, so he found it even more incredible. Even the Huai and Guofang family's Xiangang Shen Fang Jing requires the realm of heaven and man to practice the wind control technique, which can be airborne in a short period of time. Hong Fan didn't care when he heard it, but just led the way out of the tower. Today is the north wind, which is just right. He glanced at the dissipating wolf smoke in the sky and said, "Everyone, see it for yourself." Everyone stood still at the inner city gate. Hong Fan walked up to the north-south wall of the city. The radial length was nearly 20 meters, enough for him to take off and land. The true essence vibrated and pulled up the sand at the base of the wall. Then he crossed the several-foot drop and attached himself to the master like a feather. Hong Fan stepped faster. The long wind was fierce, blowing the flags on the city. With his power, he suddenly leaped into the sky. The sand wings spread out, shaped as one, and then rose at an exaggerated angle in speed, and soon it was 100 meters above the ground. The people who had lost their ability to speak were left dumbfounded. For most people on the city wall, resisting Yuansu was a realm that they had only heard of but never seen. Today was the first time they witnessed the heroic figure of humans fighting against the sky. "I have seen the Yuansi master across the sky." Liao Zhenghao stared at the undulating trajectory of the sand wings and murmured. "It rises and stops suddenly, without any entanglement with the wind. It is not the same as this." "That's right," Gongsun Shi said. "But this is not controlling the wind either. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth has not changed." He was silent for a moment, and then changed his words. "Or, it is not like the Xiangang Shen Fang Jing to control the wind with force, but with reason. The ultimate martial arts skill can actually take away the fate of flying birds." Gongsun Shi sighed again and again, and there was an impulse in his heart. Such a human elite must not be trapped in the sea of gold. If the situation is unfavorable, as the military supervisor, he must protect Hong Fan out of the city even if he risks his life. Shan Yi slowed down and fell against the wind. Everyone rushed up, but Wen's Hongwen was the only one who was still standing there stupidly. At this moment, his mind was filled with an idea. If you can fly with sand as wings, then can you also fly with iron, wood, gold and stone? Not long after, Hong Fan took off again and headed straight north. Hundreds of soldiers raised their heads and watched Shan Yi disappear into the clouds. In their ears, the voice of "I'll be back soon" spread in the wind. Just as everyone was staring, Gongsun Shi turned and went down the city. "It's only an hour, isn't the military supervisor waiting here?" Zhang Sun asked curiously. "I'll go back to the government office to prepare silver," Gongsun Shi replied without looking back. "This power sand wing must be a first-class martial art. According to the law, a subsidy of 2,000 taels should be issued," he said as he walked down the tower, his steps getting faster and faster, and finally he lost his usual demeanor and trotted all the way, at the same time, at the west gate of Jinhei City. The gate that was usually crowded with people was mostly deserted. No one left the city, only some people driving livestock and carts full of household items lined up to enter the city. "4 gentlemen, I'm in trouble." The squad leader Liu Urban smiled and handed back the token with both hands. A tall young man nodded to him, followed by 3 strong men. The 4 men wore red cloud-patterned martial arts uniforms and walked in turning street. The horses they led were all tall and strong. "Jinhei City gives me a feeling that it's not right," the leading man said. He glanced across the long street and found that many shops were not open and the pedestrians were not very lively. "Brother Wei is right," another person continued. "There are too many soldiers standing on the city wall, and the gatekeepers just now were all holding their swords." As he spoke, he turned his head to look in the direction of the north city wall, and vaguely heard the shouts of the crowd from the passing wind. "Wen Yan, go ask," the leader said. The youngest of the 4 people received the order and walked into the street-side soy sauce shop. The salty and sour smell hit him in the face. The furnishings in the shop were simple. In addition to 4 large jars half a person's height, there was a counter and a rattan chair. An old man with wrinkles on his face and dark skin was huddled in the chair. He was about 70 or 80 years old, snoring with his head half tilted back. "Father, I'm from another place and want to inquire about something," the young man named Wen Yan took 2 steps forward and asked. The old man didn't respond, and his snoring became louder. Wen Yan frowned and knocked on the counter with his knuckles, making a thumping sound. This time the old man woke up. P.S. Updated by the operation officer, woohoo brother Fan is taking off degree. Chapter 164 Tiki. What's the matter? The old man muttered with narrowed eyes. His voice seemed to be soaked in fermented black beans, and the taste was stale and heavy. I'm from another place. I want to inquire about something, Wen Yan said for the second time. The weather was not good today, the clouds were thick, and the shop was even darker. But the old man's eyes seemed to have a glimmer, and he saw the young man's figure and clothes clearly at a glance. He put his legs down from the chair, half slipped on cotton shoes, and replied. My ears are not good, I can't hear clearly. Wen Yan sighed, took out 3 copper coins from his pocket, and placed them on the table in order. Old man, I'm from another place, I want to inquire about something. Then, he spoke for the 3rd time. This time, the old man's illness seemed to have received a good medicine, and it was cured immediately. Young master, please speak, he sat up straight with a swish. We don't know about other places, but I, Old K, know everything about the streets of Jinhei City. Old man, is there anything going on in the city? Wen Yan said. I see many shops are closed and there are few people on the street. Oh, so that's what you're asking, because yesterday there was a beacon fire in the northern Sand Sea, and everyone in the city saw it, Old K replied. Beacon fire? What does that mean? Wen Yan frowned. It means the snake people are heading south again, and there should be a war in a few days, the old man said casually, got up and took the pipe from the cabinet, went to the earth stove behind the shop to get a smoldering stick, and used it to light the tobacco leaves. How strong are the snake people? Wen Yan paced 2 steps, enduring the pungent smell of inferior tobacco, and asked. Not small. Old K went back to the front room, saw the young man from outside with a solemn face, and explained with a crooked mouth. Yesterday there were 3 smoke signals, and today there are also 3 signals, which means this time they are serious. He sat down on the rattan chair, held the pipe with a crooked mouth, blew lightly, and then inhaled the aroma of burning tobacco. Don't worry, sir. We live across the sea of gold from the snake people, so we have to interact with each other. In the past few years, we have always killed them. Now the situation has changed, and the snake people are not convinced again, so let's fight again. Old K squinted his eyes and enjoyed it, and his answer was a little vague. It was a pity that there was not much tobacco left in the pipe, and it burned out after just 3 puffs. He knocked the long pipe made of old copper against the counter, and a handful of dust fell. Do you have any other questions, sir? Old K pressed down the pipe and asked finally. No. Wen Yan shook his head and turned to leave. It's embarrassing to charge you 3 cents for this little thing, Old K said as he was about to open the lid of the sauce jar. Do you want to take some black bean sauce? It tastes good, but Wen Yan just waved his hand and left. You don't know what's good. Old K curled his lips and looked out of the store, just in time to see the beacon fire in the sky slowly dissipating. So he snorted, took a hatchet from under the counter, and went to the back hall. Soon, the sound of sharpening the knife was heard. After an incense stick of time, Jinhei took over the martial arts academy. Master Gongsun, I am Shi Yuanwei. In the reception room, the tall young man who had led the horse into the city said to Gongsun Shi. These 3 are Du Boi, Gao Wenyan, and Su Zijin. Behind him, the other 3 young men also bowed and saluted. The 4 of us are all Tiki directly under the State Department, and we are under the jurisdiction of Suzuki. So Tiksha, Shi Yuanwei said, handing over the tokens of the 4 people to prove their identities. Su Sidai is familiar with me. He was also at the farewell banquet before I came to Jinhei. Gongsun Shi carefully checked the token and replied after confirming that it was correct. Lightning Flash Shi Yuanwei, I have seen this name several times in the internal references in the past 2 years. I heard that among the several Tiki teams in the State Department, your 3rd team is the most capable. It's just a little reputation, not worth mentioning. Lord Gongsun, Shi Yuanwei said modestly. No need to be too modest. Gongsun Shi smiled and brewed a pot of good tea himself. Jinhei City is 1,200 miles away from Zijing, and not everyone's reputation can be spread here. You are here to fight against the traitors of the Xiansh Society, he asked. That's right, Shi Yuanwei nodded in response. We are ordered by the State Department to come and take the prisoner. He took out the State Department document of this Hang Wen in his arms and formally handed it over. At the end of the document, there was also the seal of the governor of Liangzhou. May I ask, sir, how is the prisoner? After Gongsun Shi read the whole document, Shi Yuanwei asked immediately. Zio 12 is in the prison of this yamen, and is under the constant guard of a special person. His injuries are stable, so there is no need to worry, the former replied slowly. As for Zio Shizin's body, it is frozen in the ice cellar. He suddenly rose up in the siege and was beheaded with a knife. You know about this, right? Su Sai told us before we set out, Shi Yuanwei replied. Brother Du and my team has practiced the Ningyu Dian. His true key can turn water into ice. When the time comes, he will carry the rebel's body all the way, and there will be no risk of it rotting. Gongsun Shi nodded, asked someone to fetch a letter that had been written long ago, and sealed it with wax in front of the 4 people. We used some tricks on Zio 12, and we did get a lot of information. They are all recorded here. He pressed the sealed letter on the table in front of him. Don't worry, Lord Gongsun, we will definitely deliver it, Shi Yuanwei replied, but he reached out to take it. I have a mission to do, so I can't delay. We want to check the prisoners now. Gongsun Shi did not reply immediately. Are you guys in such a hurry? It's getting late today. Why don't you rest for a few days before leaving? He took the initiative to add tea for the 4 people and suggested. No need, Shi Yuanwei replied with 2 words. There was silence in the reception room for a moment. It seems that you also know that the snake people are heading south and their troops are already 100 miles away, Gongsun Shi sighed in a deep voice. This is related to the people of Jinhe City, but this martial arts supervisor has an unwelcome request. Please postpone your journey and stay to help Jinhe. The other party's intention was already expected by Shi Yuanwei. Before departure, the Liangzhou Martial Arts Academy received a pigeon message, which mentioned that Li Heming was dead. In this way, there was only 1 innate master left in Jinhe City. At this time, the snake people are invading, and the one person who is in harmony with heaven and man and 3 people in the pure realm of the Tiki team directly under the Liangzhou State Department are particularly precious. However, the 4 people from Zhejiang did not intend to accept this request. Sir Gongsun, I'm sorry that I can't obey your order, Shi Yuanwei refused resolutely. There will be a reward for this matter, Gongsun Shi replied immediately. I will report this in detail so that the State Department can award the 4 of you with honors according to your ranks. Afterwards, congratulations from all the families in Jinhe will definitely be indispensable. The 4 still shook their heads. Gongsun Shi couldn't help but get angry, and there was a threat in his words. It is the duty of our generation of warriors to protect our country. How can you 4 feel at ease if you are leaving the city now? As the military supervisor, it would be fine if the city is broken and you die on the job. Otherwise I will write to the governor to report the matter. The 4 were slightly shaken, and obviously had concerns. But after Shi Yuanwei weighed the pros and cons silently, he still refused. Lord Gongsun, it's not that we are afraid of death, but there are priorities. Before we set off, Siyu repeatedly emphasized the importance of the prisoner, who must be brought back alive to Zhejiang. With such an important task at hand, she really doesn't want to cause trouble. I'm sorry. Chapter 165 Investigation. At the same time, in the Jinhe Desert, Hongfan was gliding northward at high speed at a height of 2,000 meters above the ground. On the ground, a green area of several miles in radius slowly moved below him. The oasis is shaped like a long fur, and the spring in the center is like a crescent, so it is named Shanliu. The first-class beacon fire that was lit today also originated from here. Of course, the fire has been extinguished, the smoke has dispersed, and no one survived the sentry post. Beside the spring that is more than 100 meters long, only the snake people are crowded together, coming forward to drink water one by one. From a bird's eye view, it looks like a pile of colorful earthworms. Hongfan only heard the sound of the wind. He lowered the altitude to 1,500 meters. At this distance, with the eyesight of a warrior in the Hunran realm, it is enough to see the facial features of people clearly. The number is about 5,500, and considering the scattered soldiers outside the oasis, there should be more than 0.5%, Hongfan thought. He controlled the tail wing and hovered over the oasis, and saw several tail streams rising from the spring water. Looking closely, there was a long trail moving slowly under the water, at least 10 meters long. The altitude dropped to about 1,000 meters again, and Hongfan was able to observe the appearance of the snake man in more detail. He was covered with scales and had no hair. The snake body occupied 2/3 of the body length, and the part with arms and head, similar to the upper body of a human, occupied 1/3. It looked like a human but not a human, and his eyes were ruthless. Hongfan looked from afar, and he couldn't help but feel cold all over his body. He recalled Liao Zhanghao's instructions before setting off. Snake people specialize in physical training, and their body size is positively correlated with their combat power. Generally speaking, the stronger they are, the bigger they are. After circling several times, he evaluated the overall strength of the snake people and especially locked on 9 individuals. The 2 who are 8 meters long should be snake people who have undergone 5 blood sacrifices, and their combat power is in the innate category. The 7 who are 7 meters long are 4 sacrifices, and their combat power is around the peak of the hole. Just as Hong Fan was thinking, the snake people below started to move. Although the sunlight was weak today, the hang glider still cast a shadow on the ground. Your Excellency, Broken Tooth, there is a big bird circling in the sky. It has been there for a while. Snake people's language, a snake person reported to one of the 2 chief generals of the 5 sacrifices. The latter did not take it seriously at first, but after looking up and observing for a while, he finally became alert. The vision of ordinary snake people is not good, but it is different for the noble species after the blood sacrifice. Broken Tooth can see clearly that the bird circling in the sky is not a big bird at all, but something that has never been seen before. Get out of the way, it shouted in a low voice, took a finely crafted black stone spear from the side, curled up and raised its head, estimating the trajectory of the hang glider. A moment later, when the target was about to pass above it, Broken Tooth's snake body exerted force, launched itself into the air more than 10 meters, and threw the stone spear suddenly. In the eyes of the other snake people, the power of this spear is not weak. However, it is still too far to reach the target more than 1,000 meters high. Hong Fan didn't need to dodge at all. He kept his track, looking down at the stone spear flying nearly 400 meters high, and then running out of momentum and falling freely. In the end, the spear smashed into pieces on a sandstone. The damage of this attack was 0, but the movement was not small. For a moment, most of the snake people noticed the visitor in the sky. The nature of snake people is very different from that of humans. There is no noise, no chaos. They just look up and stare in unison. Facing thousands of pairs of such vertical pupils, even Hong Fan, who is extremely calm, can't help but feel cold all over. At this time, only 8 words emerged in his mind. Those who are not of my race must have different hearts. At the other end of the snake group, Qilin, the top commander of the entire army, was also ready to take action. He held a 2-meter-long stone spear and suddenly threw it when the glider passed by. As a 5 sacrificial snake person, Qilin's strength is far stronger than Broken Tooth, the difference is several times. But the effect of its attack was far inferior. Because the stone spears could not withstand the excessive force, they broke in mid-air after being thrown, turning into a piece of flying stone, and accidentally injured several snakemen. There was a little chaos in the oasis. Seeing this, Hong Fan slightly lowered the gliding altitude to about 600 meters. Then he focused his attention to the limit, not only paying attention to the 2 known 5 priest snakemen, but also taking a panoramic view of the overall situation with his peripheral vision. He wanted to test the upper limit of the individual strength of the snakemen present, and was willing to take some risks for this. It was a small risk. In the test of Sandwing V1.8, Hong Fan output a flame flow force and the Sand World True Essence at full power at the same time, and could maneuver more than 10 meters in 1 second. Considering his reaction time of tens of milliseconds at this time, even if the snakeman with Yuan magnetic combat power threw a spear at twice the speed of sound in the dark, he would have a good chance of avoiding it. As for the heavenly level, if there were really 8 priest, 9 priest, or even Son of God level snakemen in the team, Jinhei City would not be able to be defended anyway, and Hong Fan would die sooner or later. Jilin was walking through the oasis, feeling a little irritated. As a direct subordinate of the Silver Scale Godson, he was always proud of his bravery. After the 2 spears were fired, the sandbird in the sky not only did not leave, but even lowered its altitude, which was obviously a provocation. This hurt his pride. But there were very few metal weapons in the snake army, only a few hundred in total. The giant swords that Jilin had were naturally the most luxurious with the most abundant materials, but their shape and weight were not suitable for throwing. It took a lot of effort to find a steel spear with a smooth shape from his subordinates. This time, the snake man released all his strength. The sand and dust in a radius of more than 10 meters were lifted up by the huge force. The branches and leaves were whipped and shaken by the strong airflow. In the dust and fog, The iron spear soared into the sky, drifted obliquely to an altitude of about 600 meters, and just touched the edge of the glider before falling. No sonic boom was heard. The shooting height was about 600 meters. Hong Fan and Jilin looked at each other and raised the glider, so the maximum attack speed of the Snake Generals is about subsonic, about 270 meters per second. Considering the quality of the spear thrown, its destructive power is far greater than that of Li Heming. After the last circling, Hong Fan turned with the wind and returned southward under the quiet gaze of the Snake people. 3/4 of an hour later, the glider arrived at the northern wall of Jinhe City. Looking down from a high place, the vast and majestic city was like an iron wire. People were moving up and down like ants, carrying piles of stones, rolling logs, firewood and grease. Some people saw the approaching glider and began to call their friends to give instructions. As the soldiers who had watched Hong Fan go north earlier pointed out the identity of the visitor from the sky, the crowd was even more excited. "Master Hong, second young master," the voices climbed up with the wind, hollow and ethereal, but not less enthusiastic. Some people were waving, some were jumping. Everyone was laughing. The noisy voices and the lively scene were like a bowl of hot soup poured into the stomach and intestines, instantly neutralizing the coldness brought by the Snake people. At this time, hearing the noise outside, Liao Zhenghao, Zheng Sun and others who were waiting in the tower also came out. Seeing Shai Yi, they were obviously relieved, and smiles appeared on their faces that had been tense for a long time. Chapter 166 Origin. Hong Fan reduced his wings, flew down from the sky, and landed on the side of the tower. The sand wings disintegrated automatically, and scattered into the sky along with the north wind. Hong Fan rushed forward a few steps, easily dissipating his own speed of 40 kilometers per hour. Then, he was grabbed by the arm by Liao Zhenghao who came to meet him. "Finally I'm back. It's not even an hour, but it feels longer than half a day." After a few short sighs, everyone surrounded Hong Fan and went down the tower. The situation was tense, and Zhang Zun, Guangxin Shi and others had many things to do and could not wait on the city. A quarter of an hour later, the city guard's office, including Hong Jian, all the high-level officials of Jinhe gathered. The number of Snake people is between 5,500 and 6,000. Hong Fan stood alone in the hall and reported. The two main generals are 5 priests, and the rest are about 9 priests. The atmosphere suddenly became serious. The combat power of the 5 priest Snake people is at least at the innate level. After losing Li Heming, Jinhe only has Hong Jian to fight against. The Snake people soon discovered me, and then the 2 Snake people leaders attacked one after another. Hong Fan continued. The iron spear thrown by the leader reached a height of more than 600 meters. The stone spear of the other reached a height of 400 meters. I estimate that the speed of both sides' attacks was 270 meters per second and 200 meters per second respectively. This time, he used the unit system that the Instrument Works Supervision had popularized not long ago. 1 meter is 3 feet, and 1 second is 7,200ths of 1/12 of a day, 1 hour. In practice, the meter is determined by the length prototype manufactured and distributed by the Shenzhen Instrument Works Supervision. 1 second is defined based on the swing period of a simple pendulum of 0.2482 meters. Compared with later generations, this system is not accurate enough, but it is sufficient for basic use. The fact that the weights and measures are consistent with modern ones is just a coincidence. Without this stuff, many things are difficult to describe with just the virtual references of flicking fingers, blinking eyes, and cup of tea, and it is meaningless to force another set of them. Wen's Hongwen knew the height and speed mentioned by Hong Fan as soon as he heard it, but the others were stunned and needed to convert it in their minds. "Throw the iron spear 200 feet high." Hiss. Liao Zhenghao pulled his beard, wanting to say something but stopped. This is too much beyond the realm of heaven and man, so it is difficult for him to evaluate. Finally, Hong Jian spoke. "Both of them are still in the innate realm. The stronger one should be similar to me, and the weaker one is about the second level of innate." Everyone's expression eased a little. At Hongdao Mountain, the high-level innate Hong Jian could indeed destroy one Guangji with one blow. But facing the low-level innate, the realm of heaven and man can still fight for a few rounds. If they are outnumbered, they are not completely without a chance of winning. In addition, their weapons are very different from ours. Hong Fan spoke again. The prevalence of iron tools is very low. Only a few wear armor and use metal weapons. The lower-level Snake people use stone and bone tools. I watched from afar and found that the shapes are very exquisite. They generally carry shields. The shields are narrow and oval, and can be carried on the back without affecting movement, he recalled carefully. Oh, right. I found that the snake people don't seem to carry much baggage. These discoveries of Hong Fan are experience for most people present. The shields of the snake people are somewhat famous. Because of the similar shape, we call them snake eye shields, Hong Wu replied. The frame is made of marsh banyan. The wood is harder than ordinary vines, but equally strong. The outer side of the shield is covered with double layers of leather, and then glued with snake scales. The defensive effect is no weaker than our steel shields. Then, Guangxin Shi took over the topic. Snake people never need baggage. Without strenuous activities, these reptiles consume very little, and a single meal and drinking water is enough to sustain for more than 10 days. Eat a full meal before leaving the Great Swamp. Even if the sand sea is fumigating in broad daylight, they only need to drink enough water every day, he said with a cold voice. As for meat after going south, in their eyes, our Jinhe city can be said to be everywhere. As soon as these words came out, the atmosphere couldn't help but be weird. Several civil servants were even more frightened. Many of you have never seen snake people attacking a city. Seeing this, Liao Zhenghao laughed roughly. They don't use siege equipment, and their tactics are straightforward, but their claws and teeth are naturally sharp. If no one intercepts them, they will climb up the 4-meter-high wall in a blink of an eye. In the eyes of snake people, war and hunting are not much different. I have seen them swallow a few pieces of stumps on the spot to fill their stomachs when they couldn't help fighting halfway. He saw Ran Yuanlong's face turn pale in his peripheral vision, and deliberately made it vivid. Swallow it then. Wen's Hongwen leaned back in his chair and sneered. The soul has gone to hell, so why would it care where the skin goes? We peel snake skins and eat snake gallbladders anyway, so we just need to exchange courtesy. Liao Zhenghao was not annoyed when he heard this, but laughed. Haha, that's exactly what Master once said. The laughter died down in an instant. Hong Fan asked. Speaking of which, the snake people have been fighting with our tribe for more than 1,000 years. After so much exposure, there has been no progress in military equipment. He knew that the snake people had sacrifices and would trade ritual objects with humans. This was obviously enough to be called civilization. But the two tribes had lived side by side for dozens of generations, and the snake people couldn't even imitate a bow and arrow and catapult, which was puzzling. It's not that the snake people are stupid, Gongsun Shi replied. They just disdain to copy our human race. Hong Fan raised his eyebrows. Disdain? Yes, the snake people are very stubborn, Guangxin Shi nodded. They firmly believe that the limit of living things should be self-sufficiency, so all mysteries already exist in their own flesh and blood. The stronger they are, the less they will rely on external things. In the past, whenever Hong Fan saw Gongsun Wu Jian talking about snake people, he was either hateful or mocking. But this time, the latter's tone was cautious. The sky outside the window was dim, and the candlelight in the room was flickering. The huge hall was a little too solemn for a moment. That's strange, Hong Fan laughed loudly. The words limit and mystery are too vague. I don't want to comment on them, but the principle that you must sharpen your tools before you can do your job well is straightforward. The snake people must admit that Dahua is much stronger than them. Right, Liao Zhenghao shook his head. I used to serve in the military in the guards, and I have seen the captured snake people, he said. They think that our human race is weak as individuals, but it's just because we have a large population. The population depends on the land to support it, Hong Fan replied immediately. The fertile land in the world occupied by our Dahua, is it not given by the foreign races? He refuted without thinking. Oh, why didn't I think of this at the beginning? Such a domineering remark, but it was very much in Liao Zhenghao's heart, making him slap his thigh. Hong Fan was still angry and continued to speak. Besides, borrowing external objects, there should be at least a definition of the concept of external objects, not to mention swords and armor. When entering the key realm of martial arts, it is necessary to draw the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Does it count as borrowing external objects? He rarely took advantage of the situation. It is said that snake people focus on the flesh. Doesn't blood sacrifice require sacrifices? Gongsun Shi was a little speechless. Of course what you said makes sense. After a moment, Wen's Hongwen replied softly. But what the snake people think and do has its source. It is said that the 9-headed snake god feeds on the 9 mountains, has a long life and is terrifyingly powerful. The way of the snake people is inherited from him. When mentioning the gods of foreign races, the quiet room was inexplicably solemn. It was as if there were layers of curtains that were invisible to the naked eye, hanging down from the void. Everyone was silent in tacit agreement. As a second-generation human, Hong Fan had never been the type to force himself to be the first. But only at this moment, he felt a lump in his throat, and he was unwilling to stop talking no matter what. The nine-headed snake god should be able to see farther than mortals. I have no right to argue with him. Hong Fan walked to the door, looked up and stared at the blazing white light filtered by the clouds. But the martial arts was taught by Zulong himself. Zulong, you must have seen farther than the snake god. The voice was silent, but every word was clear. The hall was still quiet, but everyone suddenly felt a flash of relief in their hearts. P.S. It is still updated by the operation official. It is close to the end of the month. I hope everyone will support and vote for the monthly ticket. It would be great if I could participate in the lottery for the monthly ticket next month, although I don't know what this thing is for. Thank you again. Good night. Chapter 167 Extraordinary Measures. The wind was blowing over the city, so fierce that it soon pushed the sea of clouds apart. The sun shone a little brighter from the cracks in the sky, penetrating through the doors and windows, changing the world inside the hall. Hong Jian poured a cup of tea and handed it to Hong Fan to moisten his throat. Taking this time, the adults either chewed a few pieces of cake or wiped the sweat from their foreheads, feeling as if they were in another world. The same was true for Zhang Zhun, who was sitting at the top. The city guard pulled at his too tight collar, watching Hong Fan drink 3 cups of tea in a row like a cow chewing a peony, and thinking about the words the latter had said before. The 4 words mixing Xiangan popped up in his mind. For some reason, he suddenly didn't worry so much about the safety of Jinhe City. I saw several hidden traces in the spring water of Shanai Oasis. They are probably some huge snakes. There are about a few dozen snakemen 6 meters long. According to the garrison, they should be the 3 priests, with combat power at the threshold of the Hunran realm. The difference in body shape is too small to distinguish clearly. Hong Fan adjusted his breathing and reported all the information he had obtained. Liao Zhenghao stood up and bowed solemnly, then went to the side hall to write a military report, and after using the seal, he handed it to his subordinates to send it to the rear immediately. After a while, he returned to the main hall and took up the next topic. The criminal process has always been slow, and the Li family's affairs cannot have a result in a short time, Liao Zhenghao said to Zhang Zhun and Hong Wu. Now that the war is imminent, the Li family will have to do their best, and the 2 adults will also open the door for convenience. The 2 nodded. Li Heming is dead, and there is no follow-up to the matter of moving the clan to Huaiyang State. If the Li family wants to wash away its bad reputation, they must make some sacrifices in this battle. Just when the matter was almost settled, a Yamen runner came to the door. He was looking for Gongsun Shi. Master Wu Jian, the 4 Tiki masters you met earlier today are here again. The Yamen runner bowed and reported hurriedly. What are they doing here? Did you take them to check the prisoners? Gongsun Shi asked impatiently. That Mr. Shi said he changed his mind and can't wait until tomorrow. He wants to take the prisoners out of the city now, the Yamen runner replied. He wants to take the prisoners, and you let him do it? Gongsun Shi asked. How can that be possible? The Yamen runner explained. I naturally advised them to wait for you to go back, but Mr. Shi refused to listen and went to the prison. You and the chief supervisor were not on the Yamen, and they were holding the Imperial Guard's tokens and documents. We couldn't stop them. Fortunately, Captain Dian was in prison. After hearing my advance report, he locked the prison door and asked me to find you. When I left, the 4 masters were shouting and cursing outside the prison. Captain Dian only said that he was ordered by the 2 adults, the city guard and the city judge, to interrogate the prisoners, and refused to open the door. Hearing this, Gongsun Shi's impatience eased a little. Tianli was always cautious in doing things. Since he was deliberately delaying, he would not give up halfway. As for the 4 Imperial Guards, although they were highly skilled in martial arts, they would never dare to openly break into the prison and rob people. Master Gongsun, is there any change? Hong Fan listened to the conversation between the 2 and understood the general situation, so he asked. It shouldn't be a change, Gongsun Shi replied. It's nothing more than the Imperial Guard sent by the state to escort the 2 rebels of Fenshin society. The documents and tokens are complete, and the handover is as it should be, he sighed. But these 4 people are all elite soldiers of the state. The leader, Shi Yuanwei, is nicknamed Lightning Flash. He has practiced the Shangxing cannon to the realm of heaven and man, and his combat power should be higher than mine, and his 3 companions are also in the realm of complete perfection. At the critical moment, I selfishly wanted to let them stay and wait for the snake people to retreat before setting off. Gongsun Shi felt a little guilty. The whole room was full of people whose wealth or lives depended on Jinhei. How could they not understand this? Lord Gongsun's thoughts are public-spirited. Don't blame yourself, Qi Zihuan advised. Hong Fan's heart was also slightly moved. 1 person in the realm of heaven and man, 3 in the realm of complete perfection, and they are elite soldiers who are good at fighting. At least they can match 3 teams of masters. He looked at Gongsun Shi and asked again. Is the rank of the State Department's Tiki very high? Lord Gongsun can't dispatch them. The rank of the Tiki can't be said to be high or low, Gongsun Shi replied. Whether it is the red ribbon Tiki directly under the State Department or the purple ribbon Tiki directly under the capital, they have no official rank. Tiki are officials. Hong Fan was a little surprised. He still remembered the day when Ma Jingsha's funeral was held. The Shenjing Tiki in purple auspicious cloud pattern military uniforms sat high on their horses, looking majestic. Tiki are not officials either, Gongsun Shi denied it again. The Tiki was created 100 years ago, and later it was given an elegant name, called the Emperor's Retainers. Although they are usually under the command of the CI of the military academy, it is actually more like an employment relationship, completing the assigned tasks and exchanging merits for court rewards. As the military supervisor of a city, my rank is 2 levels higher than that of the CI, and I have the right to assign temporary tasks to the Tiki within my jurisdiction, but now they are using the excuse of escorting prisoners, so my words as a mere military supervisor are useless, Gongsun Shi said with self-mockery. Hong Fan listened quietly and had a plan in mind. The Snake People's strong attack is coming, and Jinhei City is at a disadvantage in terms of military strength and high-level combat power. At this time, any more Guantong realm will be a timely help. For both public and private reasons, how can he let these people go? Thank you, Lord Gongsun, for clearing up my doubts. Hong Fan nodded and tapped the armrest with his knuckles. We really need to find a way to keep these 4 people. What's your plan, nephew? Gongsun Shi leaned forward and asked. Since the mission is to escort the prisoners, there are only 2 ways. Hong Fan raised his head and replied. One is to relieve the escort responsibility, and the other is to get rid of the prisoners. Gongsun Shi was shocked. It's not that he couldn't think of this method, but he couldn't do it. However, thinking of the smoke of war floating in the north for 2 consecutive days, the dignified military supervisor couldn't think of a better way. At this time, Liao Zhenghao spoke decisively. Extraordinary times should use extraordinary measures. Gongsun Shi looked at Hong Jian again, and the latter also nodded. The consensus was reached, and the only question was who would do it. Or, who would bear the main risk. Zhang Sun stood up and looked around, but there was no one who volunteered. Finally, it was Hong Fan who stood up suddenly. I'll do it, he smiled freely. Zio 12's matter can be big or small, but I have some connections in the weaponry supervisor, so I think it won't be a big problem. After this, everyone had their own thoughts. Kui Jian and Qi Zihuan felt ashamed. Hong Shen blamed himself for not being responsible enough. However, no one present could guess that when Hong Fan went out with a cold and identified look, he was actually quite happy in his heart. He was going to get another complete dragon soul fruit. Half a quarter of an hour later, Jin Hai took charge of the martial arts academy. In front of the main government office, Shi Yuanwei, who was turned away, stood with his arms folded. His earlier plan today was to stay in the city for 1 night and leave tomorrow. This was not because the 4 Tiki were not energetic, but because they considered that amounts needed to recover some strength after traveling for days. However, thinking about the conversation with the Gongsun Shi, Shi Yuanwei was still uneasy, and finally made up his mind to leave the city today. It was a pity that the 4 were blocked outside the prison door by a head of the police, even though the martial arts supervisor was not there. Tiki had the support of the martial arts academy, and on weekdays, when facing any chivalrous knights or sex and villas, just a sentence of your incident has been exposed could scare the soul out of the other party. But in the government office, meeting Bian Liu, an official with official status and support from the higher-ups, he did not have much prestige to show off. Outside, Hong Fan and Gongsun Shi entered the gate of this Hangwu court. From a distance, they had already caught a glimpse of the 4 imperial guards waiting there. So Hong Fan turned from the side wing and went straight to the prison behind the government office, while Gongsun Shi met them head-on. Chapter 168 Seniority. The prison door was indeed locked from the inside. Hong Fan called out a few times and got a response from Tian Liu. The latter looked through the observation window on the side and opened the iron door without any explanation. Second Master, 4 Imperial guards from Zijing have come to take Xiao 12 away. Tian Liu opened the door and said first. I didn't hear that the adults had made such an arrangement. Seeing that those people looked anxious, I took the initiative to block them first. I know. Guangsun Wujian is dealing with it outside, and I am here for this matter, Hong Fan replied, and nodded to the prison boss and jailers who surrounded him. But what evil intentions do those people have? Tian Liu asked. They have complete documents and came for this matter. Hong Fan shook his head. It is us who have evil intentions. Tian Liu and others were confused when they heard this. Those 4 people are highly skilled in martial arts, and the snake people are coming aggressively. Master Gongsun wants to keep them to defend the city, Hong Fan explained. So that's the truth. Tian Liu understood, and his face showed difficulty. But since they are from Zijing and have been ordered by the superiors, how can we stop them? It is impossible to stop them by force, Hong Fan replied, and walked deeper into the prison with a few people. So I came to ruin their job. What do you want us to do? Second young master, the prison boss said, his face bulging with flesh, and he actually had a sense of responsibility. It's nothing more than going in and killing Xiao 12, Hong Fan laughed. At this moment, both the prison boss and the head of the police were instantly exhausted. What is the relationship between the Fanshan Society prisoners? It is normal for ordinary people not to know, but how can they who have repeatedly framed Xiao 12 not know? If they pretend to be heroes today, what will happen if the big shots in the state investigate later? Just when Tian Liu's forehead was sweating and he was struggling with his conscience, Hong Fan smiled heartily. How can you be responsible for such a thing? He said, taking the key of the no. A cell from the prison boss. Since I know, I will do it. After Hong Fan finished speaking, he motioned for everyone to stop, and then walked in alone. Seeing his back disappearing at the corner of the dungeon, Tian Liu punched a brick wall with all his strength, and his skin was torn. Bah, I usually claim to be capable, but when I really encounter something, I know that I am still a fool at heart. Captain Tian spat on the ground. Otherwise, why do we say that the second young master is our Jinhei Xianjiao? The prison boss also sighed. He is a man who really goes to the trouble. No. A cell is an underground dark room, surrounded by stones on 3 sides, and it is quite cold. It is about 10 meters square, with no windows, and the only door is blocked by an iron gate. Hong Fan took a torch from the corridor, opened the door and entered, and saw Xiao 12, who was tied to the stone wall with 4 iron chains. Although the latter's limbs were chained, his clothes were clean and tidy. Because the martial arts academy applied medicine at all costs, most of his wounds had scabbed over. Captain Tian, you really don't give up. Hearing the noise, Xiao 12 turned his head and raised his eyes. Huh? Hong Fan, in the light of the fire, he recognized a person. It's me. Hong Fan replied, inserting the torch into the cell wall. This is probably the last time we meet, Mr. Xiao, do you have any good words to give? Xiao 12 lowered his eyes and sneered when he heard this, and shook his head. Neither of them spoke. The only sound in the stone room was the crackling of grease burning on the torch. I heard that your name is Xiao Zhengxi. Hong Fan stepped forward a few steps and looked down at Xiao 12's profile. Think about your name and look at what you did. Do you have any regrets? Xiao 12 grinned and raised his head. I feel reluctant, but I don't regret it. He looked at Hong Fan's face, without a trace of dejection of a prisoner. Because what I did was not wrong, the people of Jinhei were wrong, and I was wrong. Hong Fan did not get angry, but asked again in a calm voice. You are all trying to save yourselves, and you are not wrong, Xiao Shire replied without thinking. I am a descendant of the Nano Xiao family. I came for a great cause and I will do a great cause. Killing, arson, and sowing discord are all about the matter, not the person, so you can rest assured that after my 2 brothers fail, no one from the Nano Xiao family will come to Jinhei or seek revenge on you. He turned his eyes away and stared at the fire jumping on the stone wall. I understand. Hong Fan stopped trying and waved his hand to draw the dust in the room into his palm. He was about to make a move, but suddenly felt the sound of wind behind him. At that time, a blue-black palm force came through the air and imprinted on Xiao Shire's chest. The wind moved the Hong Fan spirit platform, and the branches and leaves of the dragon soul tree swayed, with a fruit completely formed. This also meant that Xiao 12 was dead. Hong Fan suddenly turned around and saw a burly general in full armor standing at the prison door. Liao Shubai, he asked in surprise. The other party did not reply, but strode to Xiao 12 and stretched out his hand to feel his neck. After confirming that the latter was dead, Liao Zhenghao looked at Hong Fan. Don't blame me, my nephew, to take on such a thing. You have to be ranked according to seniority, he said with a big laugh, turned around and left. The two walked out of the prison door under the admiring eyes of Yan Liu, the prison head and others, and saw Gongsun Shi and 4 imperial guards coming towards them. Liao Zhenghao was dressed in military uniform, so he must be a senior officer. Although Hong Fan was dressed in casual clothes, his appearance was exceptionally outstanding. Seeing these two people outside the prison, Shi Yuanwei suddenly felt that things had gone wrong. Master Wu Jian, who are these two? He asked Gongsun Shi in a deep voice. Before anyone else could reply, Liao Zhenghao, who was walking towards them, spoke first. I'm Liao Zhenghao, the garrison commander of Jinhei City. He strode to the front of the 5 people and stood still, his eyes sweeping over the 4 imperial guards. I have something to report to Lord Gongsun. I just checked the prisoner of Fenshin Society and found that he had died due to worsening injuries, Liao Zhenghao said proudly. The 4 Liangzhou imperial guards changed their expressions. Don't be ridiculous, garrison commander. This is impossible, Shi Yuanwei replied sternly. His eyes suddenly became sharp. If he hadn't thought about the rank of the garrison commander of the city from the 5th rank, he would have scolded him long ago. Liao Zhenghao didn't say anything more. He calmly accepted the stares of the 4 imperial guards, carefully adjusted his armor and helmet, and then solemnly saluted them, and then led Hong Fan away. Lord Wu Jian, what's going on? Shi Yuanwei watched the 2 men leave the yard and asked Gongsun Shi. Let's go in and see the prisoner first, the latter replied, extending his hand to invite him. At this time, the prison door on both sides opened, and it was dark and deep inside. To Shi Yuanwei, it looked like a big jar for catching turtles. The 5 people went in and went all the way down to the end. The door of the no. A cell was open, and the torch had just burned a little bit. Xiao Shire leaned against the wall with his head down, his left chest collapsed, and blood was still dripping from the corner of his mouth. Shi Yuanwei stepped forward and lifted the corpse with his hair behind his head to check the wound. He recognized the means of killing. This was the cliff palm power widely circulated in the Dahua army, and it was not concealed at all. Okay, he took a deep breath and turned to stare at Gongsun Shi. It seems that we have to defend this Jinhei city. Gongsun Shi was speechless. Shi Yuanwei stood up angrily and pushed away the military supervisor standing behind him with his shoulders down. After the snake people are driven away, if she is still alive, Gongsun Wu Jian should know that I will never give up easily. After saying this, he left with his 3 brothers. P.S. Please vote. That's it. Thank you. Chapter 169 Indestructible. It was still early when Hong Fan left the Zhangwu Academy. There were not many pedestrians on the long street. Since yesterday, Jinhei City has been running like a clockwork machine. The cavalry spread out to the surrounding countryside and spread the message of the beacon fire to every corner. Many farmers and hunters followed and gathered in the city, turning into a force. From north to south, every household was reinforcing the walls of the house. The old people sharpened their knives, and the adults took out the swords wrapped in hay under the bed and handed them to the young boys. Passing through the alley, Hong Fan could still hear the instructions from the other side of the wall with his hearing ability. The mouth and eyes are the best. The second best is to cut the armpits. If it doesn't work, go for the belly. The scales there are soft and thin. Dad is going to the city. You stay at home to protect your mother. The response after that was ignorant and naive, forcing Hong Fan to speed up his pace. The Hong mansion was also deserted. In the Choi courtyard, Aunt Liu was packing things with Teo Hong Lielv. According to convention, the women would move to the ancestral hall to live together during wartime. Snake people are good at climbing walls, and they often sneak in when the city is besieged. As for the missing Tang Dazhen, he was gathering at the martial arts arena as the reserve team of the clan. Hong Fan returned to his room, washed himself with water, and changed into clean clothes. He crossed his legs and went to the head of the bed, wanting to meditate and flush the acupuncture points, but he couldn't calm down anyway. As soon as he closed his eyes, the densely packed snake people like earthworms in the oasis always appeared in front of him. After repeating this for half a quarter of an hour, Hong Fan got out of bed and wanted to talk to someone in the yard. However, When he entered the art and saw the two young ladies adapting to the feel of the hatchet under the guidance of Aunt Liu from afar, he felt that the few instructions in his throat were really frivolous and not worth mentioning. So Hong Fan simply went out and went straight to the North City. There are 7 horse paths on the inner side of the Jinhe City wall. The slope is 20 degrees, the width is 6 meters, and its height is level with the seawall on the top of the city, which is convenient for cavalry to ride up the city and sweep the enemy in wartime. At this time, the horse road was crowded with people. They were assembling bows and crossbows under the guidance of the craftsmen of the weapon workshop supervisor. There is no chemical composite material in this world, so bows can only be made of natural materials. The bowstring is generally made of silk, and the bow arm is made of wood, horn, cattle tendon, etc. These things are very valuable, and keeping them tied in the cold winter will damage their lifespan. Therefore, in late autumn, the weapon workshop supervisor will split them into warehouses. Now it is naturally necessary to work overtime to restore them. Hong Fan stepped onto the horse road and climbed up the city amid the soldiers' greetings one after another. The city was even busier. The fire basins set up every 10 meters have been set up. Under the parapet facing north, short axes with horizontal blades similar to rakes were placed at intervals. Hong Fan recognized this thing. It was called a file hand axe, which was specially used to cut off the hands, claws, that came up. More auxiliary soldiers were smearing oil on spare weapons such as swords, axes and spears, and placing them behind the sea wall. The snake scales were like armor, and even a sharp blade would have a gap after a few cuts. According to Hong Chang, it was normal for a fierce general to change 6 or 7 weapons in a single battle. But whether it was the hand axe or the other arrangements, they were just small things on this city. A few dozen meters away, Hong Fan saw Jin Hong with his back to him. He was directing his men to connect the yaksha and the wolf tooth slap to the iron chain hinge and test the retraction and release. On the tower farther away, Wen's Hongwen bent over to check the bed crossbow, and then fiddled with another larger unknown device. The sky was high and far away. The fields were open, and the city walls looked even smaller. However, Hong Fan looked at the people on the city and listened to the enthusiastic shouts, but he felt that the rammed earth and bricks under his feet were more indestructible than the mountains. He stood there in a daze for a moment, and suddenly felt at ease. Then he rolled up his sleeves, picked up his weapons, and joined the crowd. March 19th, not long after Shenchi, 3 p.m. The sky was clear and blue, and you could see thousands of miles away. The 4 gates of Jinhe City were tightly closed, like a giant beast lying on the ground. The city walls were armor, and the waving flags were its upright mane. The thousands of soldiers on the seawall were its claws and teeth. The enemy was 2 miles away. 6,000 snakemen were in a dense formation, forming a dark color between the blue sky and yellow ground. Hong Fan stood on a tower. Next to him was a strong crossbow, and behind him was a strong flag officer. 5 or 6 meters down, more soldiers were in groups of 3, holding heavy shields, strong bows, or spears and axes. Snakemen do not have sophisticated weapons, but their individual strength is amazing. Snakemen who have not undergone blood sacrifice generally weigh 400 kilograms, and even if they fight tigers and leopards with bare hands, it is hard to say who will win. Human soldiers need to fight 3 to 1 and cooperate well to have a considerable winning rate. Otherwise, if it is changed to 3 1-on-1, the snake people will definitely win. The sun was slightly setting in the west. The snake people's group was undulating like flowing water, and 2 giant snakes at least 7 or 8 feet long swam out of it. The 2 giant snakes held the 2 snake generals on their heads, and then rose up to the air. In this way, Jilin and Broken Tooth, who were already slender, easily gained a height comparable to the city tower and saw the layout on the top of the city. Hong Fan could see that they were observing and talking. For the time traveler, this is a very special experience. In the cognition of humans in another world, they are the only spirits of all things. Therefore, they are naturally qualified to be self-important, and can feel at ease to take whatever they want from nature, and even say the crazy words only humans can observe themselves after the universe creates humans. Hong Fan pressed the city wall, and a slight displeasure and subtle panic rose in his heart. Because wisdom is no longer something that is enjoyed exclusively by humans. At this moment, Jilin gave an order. A sound so sharp that it exceeded the upper limit of mortal hearing spread out from it as the center. The snakemen took off their shields and began to transform into a rhythmic tide from both wings, advancing southward. Their formation gradually changed as they moved. After a few hundred meters, a wide surface was formed, with only 100 snakemen in each row. Compared with human infantry, this was extremely sparse. According to the infantry tactics that Hong Fan learned in the Red Cloth Cavalry, a square formation of 50 people would only be 15 meters after being unfolded. For the same width, the snakemen only deployed 3 people. Terribly confident. On the roof of the main city, Hong Chang watched the enemy vanguard step into the 700 meters and gave orders to the messenger. There was no radio, no information chain, and no fire control. But the information still flowed on the high walls in a way unique to this era. First, the messenger shouted, and then the red pennant was raised high on each tower and waved left and right, starting from the main tower, like a beacon fire transmission. Finally, the members of the crossbow team pulled the trigger with their sledgehammers. More than 10 crossbows were released one after another, shooting at the coverage area 700 meters away at a preset elevation angle. The giant arrows were more than meters long, with iron leaves as feathers. After a breath, they reached the snake tide, shattered the shield, and pierced the 3-headed snake man to the ground. But that was all. P.S. The last section of the first volume. The battlefield description will be as detailed as possible to increase the sense of reality. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 170, Battle. For weapons like crossbows and catapults, hitting is more about aiming than aiming. The casualties may not be great, but the impact on morale is great. However, the giant arrows shot into the snake tide, like drizzle into a lake, can't even stir up much waves. Hong Fan's eyes narrowed slightly. He had seen powerful thermal weapons before, and had heard of the theory of firepower victory and Van Fleet's ammunition. But he knew better that the power of weapons was not as overwhelming as imagined, and most of the results were achieved by destroying the organization and morale. Otherwise, with nearly 2 million shells dropped in 43 days, even the top of the mountain was cut down by 2 meters. How could it not take down a few small mountains? After the first round of shooting, the crossbow soldiers replaced the pins according to the process and lowered the shooting elevation. Then several people worked together to wind the string with a winch. After the enemy entered 500 meters, the red pennant waved, and another round of volleys was fired. This continued until 300 meters away, when the crossbows switched to free shooting. A total of 10 snakemen were killed. At this distance, even ordinary soldiers could see the aliens clearly. Reflective scales, upright pupils, and silent charge. It was different from what many recruits imagined about war. There was no frantic roar, no thunderous kicking. There was no panic or sluggishness. Even the vertical pupils did not show any killing intent. But because of this, the silent march of the alien seemed to have some kind of transcendent deterrence. They were not yet far away, but they were already attacking the city wall from a distance. When the enemy was 200 meters away, the first war drum sounded on the main tower. Strong crossbowmen and archers with martial arts skills began to shoot freely. They all used armor-piercing arrows, and each hit could at least open a hole in the snake eye shield. When the enemy was 100 meters away, the second drum sounded. The archers exerted their full strength. Arrows from the top of the city wall fell like locusts, destroying many snake-scale shields like peeling onions. There were obvious casualties in the front row of the snake people. Hong Fan raised his iron bow and shot a 4-sided steel arrow. The arrow first broke the axe blade of the stone axe, and then penetrated into his face. Then, the porcupine-like snake man with 11 sharp arrows pierced his body finally fell down. But its body was still in use. A fellow tribesman passing by dragged the 5-meter-long corpse, approached the trench, and suddenly threw it on the wooden spikes. Then, without hesitation, he went down the pit and slashed left and right with heavy weapons, and actually forced a way out. Almost half a cup of tea after Qilin led his army, the snake man's sharp arrows touched the city wall. They held up their weapons, stood up and climbed up. The battle situation was like hot water at 99 degrees, and it was only 1 degree away from boiling. But at this moment, the rain of arrows on the city slowed down. Hong Ping took a file hand axe and inserted it into his waist. Hong Fu was panting, and his sweat soaked his inner clothes. He was only 3 major acupoints away from the penetration realm. Normally, Firing 5 rounds of bows was just a warm-up, but now it consumed most of the strength. "Everyone, pay attention," the captain's call was raised. Hong Fu nodded silently. Spat, gave up the iron bow, and covered himself with a steel shoulder cap. At this time, the third drum sounded on the tower. The drum sound was high and urgent, and it was actually Hong Cheng who hit it with a hammer. In an instant, countless shouts came from the top of the city, mixed together like a thunderbolt in Hong Fu's ears. His mind was blank, but his body moved on its own, and he rushed forward at the same time as Hong Ping on the other side. 2 wolf-tooth rackets hanging on wooden frames, 1.5 meters square, were pushed out of the parapet and fell freely. The rackets were 3 inches thick, with more than 1.5 feet long iron nails on them, and weighed nearly 200 pounds in total. Right below, the snake man was hit on the head, and his skull exploded like a watermelon, splashing juice all over the wall. The wolf fang racket was suspended outside the city, swinging left and right. With a creaking sound, it was pulled up little by little by the winch. On both sides were more snakemen climbing up. Then came the yaksha. This was a roller made of elm wood 3 meters long and 1 foot thick, with its surface pierced with sharp reverse whisker nails. There was a constant clattering sound. They fell along the edge of the city, dragging 2 iron chains. Before reaching the bottom, it was already covered with blood and flesh. In the distance, the giant snake carrying Jilin approached and stopped 200 meters away. This distance can be crossed in half a breath for innate combat power. On the tower facing the giant snake, Hong Jian's figure also appeared, confronting from a distance. Large sections of the trench had been leveled. More and more snakemen stepped on the corpses of their own people to climb the city. Hong Fu rushed to the parapet with a piece of stone in his arms, and just as he was about to aim, he saw that the nearest snake face was only half a meter away from him. The scales, vertical pupils, fangs, and claws digging into the cracks of the bricks were 100 times clearer and colder than what he had seen in his dreams. He suddenly choked, and the stone fell out of his hand and hit the snake man's left arm. The bone snapped. The snake man fell down a foot, and with one arm he stabilized his body and continued to move up. Hong Fu pushed the parapet with both hands, retreated several steps in succession, and his teeth were chattering, and he was a little weak. He supported his knees with both hands, and for a while he could not hear the drums and shouts of killing in his ears, only his heart was beating non-stop. On the other side, the snake man climbed onto the wall. As soon as he took back the stone knife he was biting, it was hit in the chest by Hong Ping with a big shield. The latter had entered the state of penetration for less than 4 months, and had just opened up the second main meridian, and his whole body had a strength of about 700 kilograms. But this was only the average level of the snake man after a blood sacrifice. The snake man coiled half of his body around the parapet to gain strength, pressed down the shield with one claw, and chopped down with the other claw with a knife, but was blocked by the file hand axe. The muscles on Hong Ping's neck bulged, and he exerted 120% of his strength, but was still pushed back. "Hong Fu, help me," he shouted with difficulty. The sound of the wind answered his shout. The iron arrow flew off the string and pierced into the snake man's eye socket close to Hong Ping's side face. Blood splashed on Hong Ping's face. He calmed down a little, but found that the resistance on the shield had not diminished at all. On the side, the old soldier in the same group as the two of them thrust his spear forward and penetrated the snake man's waist. Hong Fu's second arrow pierced into the snake man's neck. The force on the shield finally weakened by half. Hong Ping shouted and exerted his strength, and then he pushed his opponent off the city. The 3-on-1 fight took place everywhere on the city wall, but it was not always the humans who had the upper hand. 100 meters to the east, a green-scaled snake man pressed forward with a blade that had eaten a foot into his stomach, and chopped the stone axe on the top of the iron helmet. The flint blade was shattered in half. The helmet collapsed, and the warrior fell limp. When the sword was half pulled out, the snakeman was hit in the chest by a short spear stabbed from the side. The spearhead pierced through the torso, and a string of sparks was rubbed out by the steel and scales. However, the alien with the vital wound just opened his mouth wide, exerted force sideways in a way that humans could not replicate, and bit the neck of the spearman. The howl was distorted by pain, and the pupils were dilated by fear. But the soldier clenched the spear with both hands and rushed forward desperately. At this time, he felt something flowing around him. Large pieces of gravel bypassed the neck of the spearman and poured into the snakeman's huge mouth and eyes and nose. The sand stretched the two jaws, allowing the soldier to escape with minimal collateral damage. Then, Hong Fan suddenly clenched his fist. The snakeman's head swelled up and fell to the ground, dying. Chapter 171 Good or Bad Luck. Many snakemen have venom. Hong Fan reached out to support the exhausted soldier and wanted to check the wound on his neck. But the battlefield did not give him the leisure time. A fierce wind came from behind. The sand shield gathered in the air and was blown up by a blow. Hong Fan took advantage of this gap to push the soldiers away, raised his arms high, and blocked the sharp claws under the cover. The force of this blow was greater than expected, and it actually pressed him down to his knees. This is an elite snakeman more than 6 meters long, with ochre scales all over his body. Judging from his body shape, it should have undergone 3 blood sacrifices. It is about the combat power of the human in the initial stage of the pure realm. The snakeman spit out his tongue, staring at the prey with turbid yellow eyes, and pressing down with his claws. It is confident in its strength within the tribe, so how can it look down on the short and thin foreign race? However, just when the snakeman was expecting the sound of broken tendons and bones, his arm was forcibly lifted up. The whistling sound surrounded by wind and sand filled its internal auditory bones. From under the claws, a sand-cast warrior nearly 10 feet tall stood up. The snake man retracted his tongue, twisted his waist and thrust out his right claw, inserting it into the warrior's breastplate. It was immediately locked by the solidified quicksand. Attack and defense changed instantly. Hong Fan clenched the snake's claw with one hand, pushed back a few steps with his weight advantage, and grabbed the snake's head with the other hand, and slammed it against the parapet. Several bricks were shattered, and broken scales flew everywhere. The snake man struggled frantically, but his hands could not be freed, so he had to whip with his long tail. But it was useless. The flame flow of true energy rushed into the sand armor, raising the temperature to 800 degrees Celsius, and in a moment, the snake man's arms were disabled. The gravel on the breastplate deformed and surged forward, fixing the snake man's upper body and turning it into a guillotine. The sand knife beeped. A second later, the snake's head fell to the ground, and the cut surface was smooth. The headless snake corpse, which was still twitching, was pushed off the wall. Hong Fan dispersed the sand armor and was about to join the next battle circle, but he heard the high-frequency sound of the battle again. The snake people reacted immediately. The snakemen who had not yet climbed up the city turned around and evacuated, while those who were clinging to the city walls jumped down from the city walls. As for those who had already climbed up the city walls, they became more and more violent, attacking at all costs to save their lives, until they died. The noise gradually died down. The sun was pressing heavily in the west, casting a red twilight. It shone on the city like blood, and on the blood like ink. Hong Ping took off his helmet and threw the axe, which had been chopped and bent, back to the corner of the wall. The sharp weapon slipped out of his hand, and the fear and fatigue that were forcibly suppressed by hormones suddenly surged up. He moved a few steps in a daze, and his legs softened and he was about to collapse. At the critical moment, a force appeared in his armpits. It was Hong Fu who rushed half a step and held him up. After this fight, Hong Ping felt his hands and feet getting colder, and most of his body weight was forced to lean over. "Brother Ping, you should do a little more effort yourself," Hong Fu whispered. "I'm also very weak." Hong Ping turned his head and saw that the fat boy's forehead was stained with blood, and his relatively clean face was bloodless. "Sorry, my hands and feet are really out of control," he lowered his head and said, feeling inexplicably embarrassed. Apart from the fists and feet in the clan school, this was the first time that the two cousins had physical contact. "Sit down and rest for a while," Hong Fu replied. The two staggered and leaned against the parapet. Then, they did not dare to look around, but just looked up at the sunset tacitly. At dusk, the sunset was particularly strong, making people confused. "Hong Fu," Hong Ping suddenly called out. "I did a lot of inappropriate things in the past, and today I apologize to you." He turned his head slightly. No reply. Hong Ping was at a loss. He turned his head and saw that Hong Fu was looking up with his head resting on his hands, but he was laughing silently. "What time is it, and you are still picking up those trivial things to talk about?" The fat boy glanced at his cousin and mocked. He felt a pain in his waist, and pulled out a half-embedded scale from his armor. The scale was stained with blood from an unknown source, staining Hong Fu's fingers red. "It's a small matter, but it must be said now," Hong Ping also smiled. "Otherwise, with the situation today, Who knows if there will be another chance in the future? As he said this, he turned his eyes away and forced himself to look at the snake man who died under the women's wall a few meters away. The smile quickly disappeared. But the cold hands and feet warmed up and regained strength. An hour later, the surrounding area was completely dark, as if covered by a curtain. Rows of torches were lit behind the women's wall. Most of the soldiers went down to the city to eat and rest, and the auxiliary soldiers and reserves went up to the city to deal with the bodies and do a simple cleanup. As for the messy trenches, no one could take care of them. Hong Fan stood alone on the top of the city, looking down at the city by the light of the fire. In the pit, a snake man with its belly ripped open was lying on his back, with several wooden thorns piercing his body. But its eyes were still wide open, as if it was looking at the people on the city wall. Snakes have no eyelids, only transparent scales to protect their eyeballs. Hong Fan knew this a long time ago. Whether in China in his previous life or in Dahua in this life, snakes are closely associated with concepts such as immortality and death without stiffness. This is because the unique temperament of snakes naturally gives people a feeling between the yin and yang worlds. Behind Hong Fan, footsteps were approaching. He tilted his head and saw that it was Hong Lai coming. The statistics after the battle are out. Hong Lai also stood against the wall and said, "This battle killed 323 snake men, and we suffered 157 casualties, 74 died, 28 were seriously injured, and 52 were slightly injured and can fight again in the short term." Hong Fan sighed. One person for 2 snake men, it's not bad to say. The problem is that Jinhe is the defender, with strong bows and crossbows and sufficient city defense equipment. Given the fearlessness of the snakemen, if we change the defense of the city to field foot battle, we might be able to achieve a 1-to-10 exchange ratio, Hong Fan whispered. It may not be so easy next time, Hong Lai nodded. They all saw that the afternoon attack was just a test by the alien race. As the private army of the Son of God, the other party did not know enough about human methods. After throwing away more than 300 lives today, there will definitely be some adjustments next time. The two were speechless for a while. The fire flickered, and Hong Lai also saw the snakeman nailed to death under the city. Obviously dead, but looks alive, Hong Fan said. His voice was faint. Earlier, when he was not dead, he looked lifeless. The snakemen have sparse muscles on their faces, and it is difficult to see their expressions. Hong Lai took over the conversation. So every time after a battle with the snakemen, the first thing we do is to behead them, Hong Fan suddenly asked. Will the snakemen be afraid? Hong Lai was speechless. At this time, a rough voice responded. Of course, it was Liao's Hanghao who was passing by on patrol. Fortune tellers often say there is no good or bad luck in heaven. Have you ever heard of this, my dear nephew? He walked over and patted Hong Fan on the shoulder. If you can get what you want, it's good luck. If you can't get it, it's bad luck. When you have gains and losses in your heart, you will feel worried and fearful. According to Buddhism, it is because of self-attachment that you have troubles. Since the snake people have desires, they will naturally be afraid. Hearing this, Hong Fan asked, what do the snake people want? They want blood, Liao Zhenghao answered without thinking. Chapter 172 Altar. The 9-headed snake god is revered by his people as the source of all blood, Liao Zhenghao said. To accept blood sacrifice, transcend blood, get closer to the snake god, or simply become a sacrifice for blood sacrifice, all are acceptable deaths for the snake people, because the blood is only transferred, it is not wasted. He looked up into the distance. Under the moonlight, the snake people were busy 3 miles away, as if they were building some fortifications. But if the blood cannot return to the snake god, they will be afraid, so when there is no chance of winning, these beasts will flee without a fight. Liao Zhenghao sneered and ordered Hong Fan and the others to go down to the city to eat and have a good rest. After watching the 2 juniors go down the city, he was about to continue patrolling the city, and in a blink of an eye he saw the snake corpse under the city again. The vertical pupil was still looking up across the 2 worlds of the underworld. So a cliff palm force was thrown out by Zhang Shou, blasting the snake head. You're dead, look at your mother. Liao Shubai cursed and walked away with his hands behind his back. Hong Fan ate a big pot of rice with the soldiers guard in the city, and then returned to Chori courtyard alone. Aunt Liu and the other 2 were still in the ancestral hall, so there was no one in the courtyard. He took off his armor, washed, changed into new clothes, and tried to concentrate on observing the key. After 2 hours, Hong Fan's lost key was completely restored, but he could not concentrate on practicing, so he had to get up. The pendulum clock pointed to the midnight hour, 11 o'clock in the evening. It was not many days after March 15th, and the moon was still full, hanging in the sky, and was particularly bright. The tops of the walls and tiles seemed to be painted with a layer of rotten silver. Hong Fan paced in the courtyard for a few circles, and simply put on the smelly armor and sword again, and went out to the north of the city. Under the horse road to the city, the corpses of more than 100 snakemen were temporarily piled here, and someone was sprinkling lime on them. Hong Fan strode up the city. After being blown by the strong wind for a long time, the smell of blood between the bricks of the wall became much lighter. He walked all the way to the tower and caught a glimpse of the busy shadows 3 miles away. Over there is the camp of the snake people. Although it is called a camp, there are no tents or wooden forts. There are only sentinels, and the order of rest is arranged according to status. At this time, about hundreds of snake people are carrying earth with shields, going back and forth to build a circular platform. Hong Fan rushed up to the tower and saw Hong Cheng standing with his hands behind his back, also looking at the enemy camp by the moonlight and the rain. "Why don't you rest more?" the latter asked unexpectedly when he saw his nephew coming up. "The war is just beginning, and it's uncomfortable to be alone in the yard. It's more stable on the city, so I just came back," Hong Fan replied. "What are those guys doing?" he asked again. "They are making an altar for blood sacrifice," Hong Cheng said. "Where the snake people are stationed, there may not be guys with food and shelter, but this thing is definitely indispensable. It looks like it will be built to a height of 70 to 80 feet and an inner diameter of 50 to 60 feet. It's quite large." He stared and observed for a moment, and added, "So there will definitely be a series of bloody battles next." Hong Fan sighed. "Why, you were lucky before?" Hong Cheng was stunned and asked with a smile. "Yes, it was a little bit. Maybe that's why I couldn't bear it," Hong Fan nodded calmly. "The two people from Fanshan Society and Li Hemming have surrendered, and their arrangements have become ineffective. The clan leader is still here, and the weapons are all complete, but the tunnel and the White Thunder God are gone. I thought that the snake people would come as promised, and if they found that the situation had changed, they might go back." He laughed as he said this. "Now that I see this altar, I have given up the idea," Hong Fan sighed. He grasped the hilt of the knife, and felt his troubled mind calm down. "You have done enough and well. There are 100,000 people in Jinhe, and you can't shoulder everything." Hong Cheng sighed with emotion when he saw this. "Besides, if the beasts are determined to die, can we stop them? I'll guard here. If you don't want to go back because your house is too far, I'll have someone take you to North 2nd Street in the city," Hong Cheng said and winked at the people around him. "Half of the requisition shops was allocated to me, and it's empty now. If you can't sleep, just close your eyes and rest. If you have more strength, you can kill one more person when the time comes." Seeing this, Hong Fan didn't waste any words. After bowing, he followed his personal soldiers down the city. The night was particularly long. More than 2 hours passed, and the sentries on the city changed twice. Only Hong Cheng stood still on the city wall like an old tree taking root. It was still 2/4 before the Shen time, 3:30 in the morning. The long night was not over yet, and it was still early for dawn. This should have been the coldest and darkest time of the day. But the walls of Jinhe City were slightly reddish due to the firelight. 3 miles away, the main part of the altar built by the snake people was completed a few quarters of an hour ago. At this time, the hemispherical altar with a diameter of 20 meters was filled with firewood, and a 50-60 meter high flame was blazing. Hong Cheng put his hand on the city wall, staring at the flames in a trance, and watched for another half an hour. It was not until the fire was about to go out that he felt his eyes dry and stretched out his hand to pinch his eyebrows. A rough voice came from the side of the tower. "After this fire is burned out, the altar will be completed." The visitor was his superior. "It's almost 4 o'clock in the evening. You go down and rest for a while." "I'll do it," Liao Zhanghao said, glancing at the fire in the distance, and he didn't think it was new. He had seen snake people build altars before. The main structure is made of rock and clay, and then burned with a fierce fire after completion, similar to the firing of bricks in Dahua. "There's still more than half an hour before dawn," Hong Cheng replied, shaking his head. "Snake people hide during the day and come out at night. They can see without sunlight, and usually launch attacks at night. We are just the opposite. The second half of the night is when we are most tired and sleep soundly. Now this is the most dangerous time. I might as well wait until I have breakfast before resting." Liao Zhanghao heard this and stopped insisting. He immediately called his personal soldiers to carry a square table out of the tower and served a few more dishes. The rice was hot, but the dishes were cold. It's hard to talk about the taste, but it can only be said that there is a saltiness. So behind the parapet, the garrison and the commander of the city defense department sat opposite each other, chewing and looking silently at the 3 miles away. With their cultivation, the movements of the snake people can be said to be unobstructed. A quarter of an hour later, the fire was basically extinguished. However, the movement in the camp was even louder. The snake people formed a team, not afraid of the residual heat, and went up the slope to the altar one by one. They cut their arms with their claws and each of them let out some blood. The blood was steamed by the residual heat of the coke and the pit wall, and bursts of mist rose. For a moment, it seemed as if a red cloud floated above the altar. Then, some large snakemen brought back the bodies of 20 or 30 of their compatriots from the retreat yesterday, and threw them into the pit. Liao Zhanghao still looked bored. Until Qilin went up to the altar, this amount of bodies must not be enough for a blood sacrifice. He thought, and saw the snakeman leader holding up a bottle made of bones. The mouth of the bottle tilted, and a drop of dark golden blood slowly poured out. As this drop of blood fell into the altar, the crimson cloud instantly boiled. Chapter 173 Bloody Battle. Liao Zhanghao could no longer sit still. He had seen blood sacrifices by snakemen before, but never like today. The red cloud rolled up and down, enveloping the upper half of the altar, and then spread out in all directions like a wave. Below the earth slope, thousands of snakemen lined up in a radial formation, constantly bowing their heads towards the center, performing a prostration ceremony. 3 miles away, no sound could be heard. But Liao Zhanghao could see that the morale of the snakemen had been raised to the limit. Soon, the real change swept to the Jinhe city side. The defenders lowered their eyes and saw a thin red mist rising from the trench. This was the residual blood that had been drawn out. After a few breaths, the piled snakemen corpses in the city also reacted. The blood plasma that had long been solidified dried up faster, turned into smoke at the open wound, and rose into the air like silk. The fishy smell spread. The red cloud passed over the city wall and headed north, and the destination was the snakeman altar. The sharp howl of Jilin hit the city wall. The snakemen began to organize their troops. At the same time, Hong Fan woke up from his inner vision. The branches of the dragon soul tree on the spiritual platform rustled, as if pointing to something. The feeling was similar to that of the Zhao brothers, but even more bizarre and huge. He left the bungalow and walked a few dozen steps out of the street. Opposite him was the city wall. There was a slight smell of decay in the air, and red silk threads floated on the top of the city. The shouts of junior officers came one after another. The continuous military tents were lifted, and the soldiers gathered in groups and teams, rushing up the city trail. All of this was in harmony with the sound of war drums coming from afar, just like the gradually strong pulse of Jinhe City after waking up. Hong Fan jumped onto the city wall in a few steps. 3 miles away, he saw the snake people also adjusting their formation. On both sides of the sea wall, the fire basins were all lit. Then more torches were brought up to the city by soldiers, illuminating the surroundings as if it were daytime. The dense flames can give courage in the dark night, and can also confuse the snake people's thermal vision. It was a quarter after the yin hour, 4:15. In the darkest time before dawn, the snakemen launched a full-scale attack. The area was nearly 4 miles wide, covering the entire northern wall of Jinhe City. Hongfu ran up the city along the trail. He was still sleepy when he left the tent. When he got to the city, he saw the reflective eyes in the darkness 100 meters away, and he woke up immediately. The drums of war never stopped, and they became more and more urgent. The battle flags swayed on the city wall in the light of the fire. Hongfu heard the vague sound of the pipa, which was the string of the bed crossbow. But the night was too dark, and his cultivation was not enough to see the trajectory and results of the crossbow arrows. The snakemen walked 100 steps away and began to change their formation. In the middle of each section of the city wall, the wolf-toothed clap and the yaksha halberd that had caused huge casualties were avoided. Arrows rained down from the city, like a tide. Under the city, it was like a reef going in the opposite direction. The trench was easily crossed. There was no prelude to the fight, and the beginning was the climax. Hongfu held a file-shaped hand axe and chopped off the claws that climbed up the parapet. The old soldier on the right tried the same thing, but was bitten on the shoulder by a snake man who suddenly jumped up and dragged him down the wall. Hong Ping's eyes turned red. He thrust his spear forward and penetrated the sternum of another snake man. The spear blade twisted and scraped against a bone with a creaking sound. The snake man was about to run out of strength, but a palm-length poisonous snake popped out from his armpit and bit Hong Ping on the cheek. The pain was as light as a mosquito bite and was not worth mentioning. Hong Ping kicked the corpse down and pulled out the gun with one arm. He pulled off the small snake hanging on his face and stuffed it into his mouth. After a few chews, his lips and teeth were bleeding. More and more snake men rushed onto the wall. After a cup of tea, the defense line gradually became uneven. The red square flag was first raised on the main tower, and soon spread to the entire wall. Jin Hai's method of suppressing the stage was used. The hollow square cabinet, more than 1 meter high, was made of copper, and on top was a pump supported by 4 pipes. The front end of the pump was conical and was placed above the brazier, roasted until red hot. Every time the fire operator pulled the piston, several liters of dark brown viscous liquid flew 6 or 7 feet away and ignited in the air. Hong Fan recognized this thing, called the fierce fire oil tank, and it ejected crude oil. With the help of the fire dragons that stretched out to the left and right sides of each horse-faced wall, the situation was greatly eased. The snake people responded immediately. Beside Broken Tooth, a giant snake more than 20 meters long was ordered to press forward. This was a large swamp beast domesticated by the snake people. Its strength far exceeded that of the warriors, and its role on the battlefield was many times more. The giant snake approached with strong crossbows and arrows, followed by dozens of second-level snake priests. Each of them had at least high-level combat power. Hong Cheng sat on the city wall and watched coldly. Large-scale engagement and then gathering elite troops to break through the surface were the usual tactics of the snake people. "Let the Li family take the first battle," he shouted. As soon as the military order was issued, a messenger flew down the city wall. Soon, the 4 remaining members of the Li family led 3 teams of Wudang cavalry along the horse road to the city. They were all wearing double armor and holding heavy blunt weapons such as golden melon hammers. Thunder roared in waves, even drowning out the shouts of killing. The snake people's breakthrough was blocked. In the back, Broken Tooth picked up a strange sword and shield as high as a person and joined the battlefield. On the Jinhei side, the Shinran sympathy who had been waiting for a long time also moved accordingly. There was still a distance of 30 meters from the high wall. Broken Tooth curled up and jumped up, intending to climb the city in one fell swoop. While flying, Hong Wu's fire cloud palm arrived first from a distance, wasting its momentum. Shi Yuan Wei activated the Divine Travel Classic, flying in the air at a speed faster than his opponent, stabbing with a sword. The third person to arrive was Liao Zhenghao. The cliff palm power blasted out from a distance, blasting Broken Tooth back to the city. Due to this delay, Gongsun Shi and Qi Zihuan, who came from the east and west, arrived one after another. The 5 celestial beings stood on the top of the wall, their eyes were fierce and they were ready to fight. Broken Tooth looked up and felt it was difficult. At this time, Jilin sent out the second elite. They also led and covered with giant snakes to attack the weak section of the city. Hong Fan was fighting on the front line and immediately noticed the changes. The wind and sand gathered and climbed the outer wall into sand. He jumped out of the sea wall and walked around the horse-faced wall at high speed. He was the first to reach the next section of the city. The elite snake people were just going up to the city. "Get out of the way," Hong Fan shouted and accelerated. The sand flow behind him rolled back in the air and turned into a large shield on his left arm. With a backhand shield strike, the leading snake man was thrown out of the parapet. The exploded sand shield turned into sand arrows that swept around, blowing away countless bloody flesh and scales. The elite reserve team on the Jinhei side also arrived. Dozens of heavy armored warriors pushed forward like a wall, taking advantage of the snake people's unstable foothold to greatly compress their line. Suddenly, a mighty wind sounded, blowing the flames off. Hong Fan looked in the direction of the sound and saw a giant snake with a diameter of more than 1 meter, winding its body and easily climbing up the top of the city wall, crushing large pieces of bricks. The snake's head smashed down and hit a brave rider of the Qi family. Bone, flesh and armor pieces splashed. A blood mist rose up and headed north against the wind. Then it was scattered by the sand flow rushing up from under the city. Hong Fan gathered sand armor and took only a few steps forward. His body was 2 feet taller. He shouted angrily, and the 700 kilograms of hammer stirred the air and hit the side of the giant snake's head. In an instant, everyone felt a shock under their feet. The snake's head suddenly tilted, and blood spurted out from under its scales like a knife, splashing more than 10 feet. The fresh smell of blood hit Hong Fan's nose, which increased his killing intent. He raised the heavy hammer and was about to chase, but was hit on the back by the giant tail that swept under the cover of the city wall. The sand armor exploded, and a muffled sound pressed against his ears. Hong Fan smashed the wooden frame that Langa had built, flew more than 10 meters away, and rolled down under the tower. He tried to get up, but a mouthful of blood clotted in his chest, and he couldn't muster any strength. Chapter 174. Don't panic. Hong Fan was severely injured, which made the red-clothed riders in the team furious. Hong Bo threw out his round shield and knocked down the snake man who was blocking the road. Then he held two heavy axes and stepped forward to chop the giant snake hard. This attack was clever. The axe blade was slightly tilted and cut into the gap between the armor plates, nearly a foot into the flesh. But considering the size of the giant snake, it was still only slightly injured. The severe pain diverted its attention. The giant snake abandoned Hong Fan and turned its body to wrap around Hong Bo, pulling him off the ground. The snake's mouth was high and the stench was pungent. Hong Bo felt that his death was imminent, so he took off his iron helmet and bit the snake's body, but unfortunately he failed to break the scales and broke several teeth. Fortunately, he was not fighting alone. On the four sides of the city, the 400 realm and the reserve team each threw a rope spear and penetrated the snake's neck. The giant snake was seriously injured this time. It struggled wildly, stretching several long ropes straight. Ding Yushi, who had the lowest cultivation, was dragged and staggered. Kui held the parapet, but the huge force on the rope caused him to break the bricks. In the center of the battle, Hong Bo, who was squeezed by the snake, had a red face. The armor on his chest deformed and made a sound, and blood dripped from his nose. Just as the giant snake was about to escape, a wave of sand rose up and turned into a fifth chain, grabbing its jaw. Hong Fan re-entered the battle. More gravel was drawn up from under the city, covering the top of the city with a dim yellow. After several fierce battles, his sand world essence was not much left. But just now, the dragon soul fruit from the Zio brothers had been used. The injury recovered rapidly, and the essence cycle ran wild. The white disaster slashed horizontally, and the head of a 3-sacrifice snake man flew up, and blood gushed out like a fountain. Hong Fan jumped up with a flying step, gathering the scattered fine sand in the air under his feet as a ladder. Stepping on the snake head, he raised his right arm. The sandstorm that was dragged behind him suddenly returned, and with the forearm as the core, it formed a narrow drill. "Help me," Hong Fan shouted loudly, and the four pure realms tightened the long rope at the same time. The giant snake's movement was paused. A buzzing sound suddenly sounded. The sand drill penetrated and pressed into the top scales. Golden sparks flew in all directions in the air, falling like rain. The stalemate lasted only half a breath. Hong Fan felt his right arm suddenly sink, and the sand drill had penetrated the scales and skull, crushing the brain. He flipped to the ground. The giant snake was left swaying and spasming, smashing large pieces of wall bricks, and finally slid down the city through the gap. At the same time, the roar of a tiger rose to the sky hundreds of meters away, and in an instant it spread across half of the Golden Sea. This was the sound of the innate skill flame roar of the flame flow gong being fully activated. Hong Fan cast his eyes and saw the land in the distance emitting orange-red. In the distorted and indistinguishable atmosphere due to the sharp rise in temperature, two figures with very different sizes moved at high speed and collided back and forth. The last trump cards of both sides, Qilin and Hong Jian, finally came to an end. This was the most crucial battle on the battlefield of tens of thousands of square meters. But Hong Fan had no time to pay attention. Although the giant snake was dead, more elite snakemen were still charging up. Glancing at Bai Zai's slightly canine-like blade, he pushed forward again. In this way, half an hour passed in the battle. It was exactly a quarter before the hour of Mao, 5:45. The fierce fire oil tank had already run out of fuel. Half of the Li family's Wudang cavalry suffered casualties, making it impossible for the snakemen to stand on the wall. The 5 celestial beings had exhausted their sympathetic true energy, and Gongsun Shi and Hong Wu were seriously injured one after another. But Broken Tooth was blocked under the city. The beeping sound of the sand flow knife was hoarse. Hong Fan made sure that the snakeman's corpse was no longer moving, and then he climbed up, The helmet was thrown somewhere, and the shoulder cape was chopped to pieces by the stone axe. His Yanliu true energy and Mingxing true energy were both exhausted, and his physical strength was exhausted. This battle lasted for more than an hour, and Hong Fan was always brave in the front. If the front line wavers, the sands will soon be dancing. Seeing the figure of Jinhei Xingjin, the defenders who were originally unable to hold on will gain courage from nothingness and stabilize their position. But the battle is not over yet. Seeing Hong Fan's decline, a second-level snake man rushed over with a shield, trying to take advantage. An hour ago, this kind of stuff was not worth a knife from him. But now Hong Fan's legs seemed to be filled with lead, and he was knocked back. Just when he was embarrassed, a figure flashed from the side and stabbed the snake man's neck with a knife at the risk of his life, and was immediately blown away by the snake's tail. Hong Fan seized the opportunity and stabbed the white disaster into the opponent's heart with his backhand. The snake man fell limp. A few meters away, the fallen man straightened his helmet and stood up with difficulty. It was Hong Qing, who had just joined the Red Cavalry not long ago. The two men looked at each other, and neither of them had the spirit to speak, but just nodded silently. Hong Fan stepped forward, stepped on the snake man's body and drew his sword. With a little force, the sword got stuck in the bone and could not be pulled out. He frowned and tried again, then heard a clanging sound, and his hand suddenly felt lighter. Baizhe was broken. This fourth-grade precious sword could not withstand two fierce battles and died before its owner. At this time, the sky was half bright. Dark red flames burned up from the eastern sky and ignited the clouds. The north of the Jinhei city wall was filled with a thin blood mist. The altar 3 miles away was gradually filling up. Qilin seemed to have sensed it and stopped fighting with Hong Jian. He retreated hundreds of meters and screamed. The snake people finally retreated like a tide. Only the broken potholes and blood-soaked city walls were left. Hong Fan suddenly relaxed, and his eyes suddenly went black. He had to lean on his knees to relieve himself. In the same section of the city, 7 or 8 feet away, Zhang Yao lay on his back. Every breath of cold air sucked in from his nose made his lungs sting. But Zhang Yao still tried his best and gasped like a broken bellows. It seemed that if he didn't do this, he couldn't be sure that he was still alive. The snakemen went far away, retreating to a distance of several miles. The second bloody battle came to an end. There was no cheering, only dull silence. Most people collapsed directly. In the dead silence, footsteps were heard from the bottom of the city. A man jumped up lightly and stepped onto the sea wall. His outer armor and inner clothes were rotten, and his upper body was blue and red, covered with scars. It was Hong Jian. He glanced around, first staring at Hong Fan for a moment to confirm that he was not seriously injured, and then glanced at a 7-meter-long snakeman corpse, and Shi Wu, who had already died leaning against the city tower. The remaining soldiers on the city also saw Hong Jian. "Master," Hong Bo called out instinctively, revealing 2 black gaps in his teeth. He propped himself up and looked around for something. However, the top of the city was full of broken bricks and rotten wood, blood and flesh. The corpses of humans and snakes overlapped. How could he find the body of the person he was worried about? In the end, he could only say blankly, "Master, my brother is gone." As soon as these words came out, his originally empty eyes were filled. Hong Fan stared at Hong Bo. This giant didn't frown even when he was almost strangled to death by the giant snake. But when he looked at Hong Jian at this time, his nose was sour and he choked silently. Hong Jian nodded silently, stepped forward and pressed Hong Bo's shoulders. The latter sat on the ground and wiped his tears with his hands, but the more he wiped, the more tears came, and gradually he couldn't even hold back his crying. Hong Fan turned his eyes and looked to the north. Thick blood mist gathered above the altar, competing with the morning sun, and there was a faint snake shape in it. "Don't panic." At this moment, Hong Jian's voice spread on the city wall. "The sky is falling, I'll hold it up." Chapter 175 Force Measure. It was bright. The sound of dogs barking and people gradually rose, and smoke from cooking rose from the city. Hong Fan went to Qui's Tiangtan to get a new steel sword and hung it on his waist, then went back to Choryuan. After washing, changing clothes, and eating a few hot pancakes made by Aunt Liu, he returned to the North City. Only when he stood on the high wall and had the snake people's camp in the distance under his eyes, did Hong Fan's mind settle down. Then, he found a corner in the tower that was not on the way of others, and fell asleep with his scabbard as a pillow and his helmet on. This sleep was quite uneasy, and nightmares continued. There seemed to be the roar of war drums. There seemed to be vertical pupils spying. The blade of the knife was bent, and blood covered the hair. At the end of the dream, Hong Fan inadvertently looked up at the horizon, and vaguely saw a big snake with several heads staring at him. He didn't know how long he slept in this dream. When he lifted the helmet on his face, the iron armor on his chest had been sunburned and hot. The sun was dazzling. Hong Fan squinted his eyes and caught a glimpse of the sky. He felt a dull pain in his head, so he closed his eyes again and looked inward. The true energy was flowing automatically. Although he didn't rest well, his fighting power was still mostly restored. And thanks to the Dragon Soul Fruit, his cultivation successfully broke through the second meridian of Hunran, and the third meridian Yangwei meridian was also opened up by 40%. Are you awake? Someone spoke beside him. Hong Fan opened his eyes and noticed that Hong Sheng was standing not far away. He was wearing heavy armor and had a bloody and sweaty smell. There was a fresh wound on his left cheek, from the corner of his eye to his jaw. Fortunately, the wound was not deep and had been medicated. Hong Sheng's expression was very serious. But after not seeing him for a day, he seemed to have grown 10 years older. What's wrong? Hong Fan knew that something must have happened, so he asked. The blood sacrifice of the snake man has begun, Hong Sheng replied. The 5 sacrifice snake man who fought with my father at dawn has entered the altar. He knew very well that the other party was not asking about the wound on his face. After 2 bloody battles, as long as people are still alive, it is not a big deal to lose arms and legs. Upon hearing this, Hong Fan got up and looked north. The red fog that covered the sky in the early morning had disappeared. The snake people were surrounding the altar in layers, waiting quietly. From the picture alone, there was nothing special. But Hong Fan could feel the special depression, like the dull atmosphere before a storm. The atmosphere on the city was also solemn. He turned his eyes and glanced around. The city wall had been basically cleared, and the bodies of both armies were gone. Since it was known that the snake people had special means to absorb blood from a distance, the human side would naturally have a response. Among the newly replaced defenders in the city, he also saw Zhu Jingfu and Jia Ziyong. On the main city tower, 5 masters of heaven and man gathered together, seemingly discussing joint attack methods. Only Hongwu and Gongsun Shi were seriously injured by broken tooth and could not fight again in a short time, so they were replaced by Jeshian Lang, the head of the Whirlpool sect, and Kui Jiayan, the head of the Kui family. At this time, Hong Lai stepped up on the wooden ladder. How is uncle's injury? Hong Fan asked first. At dawn, he heard that Hong Li was injured by a 4-sacrifice snake man, but at that time he was exhausted and could not care more. I just came from the mansion, Hong Lai replied, forcing a smile. The thigh was cut and the tendons and bones were injured. Fortunately, the skirt armor cushioned it, so there is no worry about life. Sheng Fan and the others were relieved when they heard it. After a moment, Hong Sheng couldn't help asking, cousin, is there a time when the snake man's blood sacrifice is unsuccessful? Of course there is, but since they did it, they are more or less sure, Hong Lai replied. We can only wait for the result. Without an absolute advantage in combat power, you can't fight a snake man in the field. Hong Fan nodded silently. In the second bloody battle, Jinhei City suffered more than 2,000 casualties, which was slightly more than the snake man. In addition, more than 1,000 people were exhausted and could not fight again in a short time. This is still relying on the city walls and military equipment. Half an hour later, it was 2 p.m. The sunlight reached its peak in the day. The blood fountain on the altar boiled without fire, and a large number of bubbles emerged. After a while, a huge snake skin floated in the blood and quickly melted. The snake people held their breath and looked forward to it. They were not disappointed. The blood rippled, and the fiery red scales slowly rose from it, and their bodies were more than a meter longer than before. On the top of the city, countless hearts sank to the bottom of the valley. Hong Fan swallowed his saliva and watched the snake leader 3 miles away get off the altar. Has it completed its 6th blood sacrifice? Hong Sheng asked softly. No one answered. In the distance, the red scale stretched his body and looked at his brand new body. Then it looked at Jinhei City from a distance and took an iron spear from Broken Tooth. After a moment of accumulation of strength, the iron spear was thrown. What does this mean? Just as Hong Fan was wondering, the turbulence and shock waves caused by the spear tearing the airflow spread out, blowing away the sand and soil within dozens of meters of Qilin. At the foot of the altar, a yellow cloud rose from the flat ground. Time seemed to slow down. On the city wall, Even the experts at the level of pure and heavenly interaction could not see the trajectory of the spear. In everyone's eyes, there was only a red mark across the atmosphere. Afterwards, the circular shock waves exploded heavily, like a series of cone-shaped flower buds, blooming one after another. The iron spear hit the city wall below Hong Fan's side. The rubble and soil exploded, and the shock wave pushed and released. In the nearly vacuum impact area, the atmosphere rolled back, and the strong convection caused Blue Hong Fan's clothes and armor. Only then did the thunder of the spear breaking the sound barrier come late, passing over the top of the city and going far away. The smoke and dust subsided. The iron spear had already been shattered. But the wild aura representing absolute power swept over the city walls like a tsunami, extinguishing the defenders' fighting spirit. "It's done," Hong Lai replied with a faint tremor. He had fought with snakemen many times and knew that it would take several months for their scales to harden and stabilize at a new peak of power after the blood sacrifice. For the snakemen opposite who could fight Hong Jian at the fifth sacrifice, this peak might be the middle level of Yuanzi or the high level. But no matter what, it has now crossed the boundary between Xianshan and Yuanzi. The spear just now was proof of this. Hong Sheng's teeth chattered. Hong Fan's hands were also shaking as he pressed the city wall. At this moment, the first thing the time traveler felt was trance. After coming to Dahua for a whole year, he earned many identities. Dragon-granted Star Lord, Golden Sea Pride, Mathematics Genius. Although the future is uncertain, it should be no different no matter how he thinks about it, until he witnessed the spear that just spanned 3 miles. Hong Fan suddenly understood what force measure meant. He had an idea that he couldn't help but think of. Jinhe City cannot be defended. I will die here. The invisible and yet huge fear spread out and grabbed Hong Fan's heart. Followed by more and more chaotic thoughts. Jinhe must be broken. My life is at stake. No need to make unnecessary sacrifices. If I leave now, I can escape. Thoughts rose and fell, circling endlessly. Until a clanging sound. It was Hong Fan who suddenly drew out the steel sword. From beginning to end, he did not move. There were not so many complicated trade-offs as before, just 3 words. Can do it. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.